Hey guys, tonight we're crossing the Atlantic in a converted troop ship with 1,000 other women, a suitcase full of ration book habits, and a husband you've known for approximately 4 months, standing somewhere on the other side of an ocean. Not the romance, not the sepia-toned kiss at the station, the part that comes after, the Frigidaire in rural Ohio, the mother-in-law's casserole, the welcome pamphlet explaining what a sidewalk is. If a slow, slightly damp historical immersion is the kind of thing that helps you sleep, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And a warm thank you to one of you for suggesting tonight's topic. Whoever you are, I hope you're somewhere warm, because these women frequently were not. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always somehow the small hours of the morning somewhere, and tonight that feels especially appropriate. Maybe tuck the blanket up a little higher. In honor of a British woman who spent her first American winter discovering that central heating and emotional warmth are not, in fact, the same thing. Dim the lights, turn on a fan, get comfortable, and maybe make yourself a proper cup of tea, because in about 4 minutes, someone is going to hand you a thin, pale, aggressively optimistic American coffee and expect you to be grateful. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to board a ship in Southampton with everything you own and a wedding ring from a man you met during a blackout? What exactly was in the Red Cross welcome packet, and did it cover the part where peanut butter exists? Could you navigate an American supermarket after a lifetime of handing a ration book across a counter? How do you make change in dimes when you've only ever thought in shillings? What happens when you arrive at your husband's family home and realize the word home was doing a lot of heavy lifting in his letters? What does a Frigidaire actually feel like the first time you open one? And what do you do when the man who wrote you 47 letters turns out to be a slightly different person than the one who wrote them? Congratulations, you've just woken up in Southampton, England, February 1946. The dock smells like diesel, and goodbye. Your coat is your best one, and it is already damp. Good luck. You stand at the foot of the Queen Mary's gangway in Southampton on the morning of February 5th, 1946, holding a brown leather suitcase that your mother packed for you the night before. A petty officer in a wool peacoat looks at your papers. He looks at you. He looks at your papers again. Around you, 1,000 other women are doing the same thing, holding the same kinds of suitcases, marrying the same kind of American. The line moves up the gangway one wife at a time. There are 1,279 of you, 73 children too, small enough that they don't entirely understand what's happening, which puts them ahead of most of the adults. The Queen Mary has done this crossing before, but not like this. Not packed with women in headscarves and their best coats, gripping departure paperwork that took months to produce. She was a troop ship before she was a bride ship. The corridors still smell like it. Let's talk about the bunks. They're stacked 4 high in converted cargo holds below the waterline, which is basically a carnival cruise, except there's no buffet, and the person above you is also seasick. The Atlantic in February does not behave. The ship lists. Your suitcase shifts. The woman in the bunk beside you, whose name is Margaret and who has never left Birmingham in her life, makes a sound you will remember for years. The corridor smells of salt and diesel and something else, sour, metallic, and faintly human, that arrives by the second morning and doesn't leave. Your suitcase has 3 dresses, a photograph of your mother in the front pocket, and a small tin of Twinings that you packed yourself when your mother wasn't looking. She packed everything else with the focused efficiency of a woman who has been preparing for this departure since the day you told her his name. She folded each dress with tissue paper between the layers. She did not cry in front of you. She cried in the kitchen afterward, where she thought you couldn't hear her, next to the copper boiler that you've both stood beside every Monday your entire life. The crossing takes 6 days. You are sick for 4 of them. A Red Cross volunteer, named Mrs. Halloran, moves through the hold with a clipboard and a practiced expression of cheerful neutrality, asking everyone how they're doing. Everyone says fine. Mrs. Halloran writes something down and moves on. The clipboard has a lot on it by the third day. What you have boarding this ship is roughly 3 to 6 months of courtship, and that's the generous accounting, the version that counts the letters and the dances and the one weekend in Dorset. Some of the women boarding behind you had less. Some had weeks. Some had days that felt like weeks, because of the particular mathematics of wartime, where an afternoon could hold more weight than a year of ordinary Tuesdays. You knew his rank, his laugh, his preference for tea over coffee, which will matter less than you think. England is still behind you. Technically, you can't see it anymore. The harbour has closed over. What's ahead is 5 more days of open water. And then, somewhere on the other side, a man you married and a country you've only seen in films. The kind with wide streets and enormous cars and women in clean aprons standing in front of refrigerators as if the refrigerator is the point. You will have a refrigerator. Your mother will not have a refrigerator. You filed this fact away somewhere and closed the drawer on it. The line below deck shuffles forward. Someone's child starts crying and then stops, as if reconsidering. The ship moves out of the Solent and into the grey open Atlantic, carrying 1,279 women towards something that was described to them in a great many ways, most of them warmer than the facts will turn out to be. You are assigned a number, a corridor, and a bunk. The bunk is the third one up in a stack of 4, and the stack is one of 40 stacks in a converted cargo hold below the waterline. You sit on the metal frame for a moment, because there is nowhere else to sit. The woman in the bunk below you is from Liverpool. The woman in the bunk above you is from Bath. Neither of them looks pleased about the next 6 days, and neither of them, as a rule, will be. The Queen Mary was, until very recently, a troop transport. Before that, a luxury liner. What you are on now is, in essence, a carnival cruise that has been stripped, painted grey, and instructed to behave. The luxury liner version had a different smell. What you are experiencing now is a smell that is salty, metallic, and faintly institutional. The particular staleness of a space that has held 10,000 anxious people in sequence and has absorbed all of them. The corridors are narrow enough that 2 women with bags cannot pass without negotiating. The negotiation happens silently, through shoulder angles. You become good at it by day 2. Let's talk about the seasickness. It is not a possibility. It is a schedule. The North Atlantic in February has its own opinions about passenger comfort, and those opinions are strongly held and non-negotiable. The ship rolls. The bunks creak in a rhythm that would be soothing if it were not also nauseating. The woman from Bath, whose name is Margaret, and who has a talent for stating things plainly, announces on the first evening that the whole experience is, quote, not ideal. She then turns toward the wall and doesn't speak again until the 3rd day. There are 1,279 of you and 73 children, which means the children are also somewhere in this arithmetic, distributed among the corridors with the focused energy of small people who have not yet understood that this is supposed to feel significant. A toddler named Colin has already made friends with a porthole. You are not sure what he is getting out of the relationship, but he seems committed. The meals happen in shifts. The food is serviceable in the way that food on a military vessel in winter is serviceable, which is to say it is hot, present, and not something you would describe to anyone later with fondness. You eat it because the alternative is lying in your bunk calculating how many days remain, and the calculation does not improve with repetition. 6 days. 5. 4.5 if you are generous with the math. You are generous with the math. What you talk about, in the corridor and at the meal tables and in the half-dark of the hold at night, is him. You compare stories the way other people compare recipes, with adjustments, with small competitive embellishments, with the particular care of women who have staked something real on a courtship that lasted, in several cases, fewer weeks than it takes to knit a decent jumper. His name, his town, his mother's name and what he said about her, which may or may not have been accurate. The woman from Liverpool met her husband at a dance in 1944. She saw him 11 times before he shipped out. She has a photograph. Nobody says the obvious thing out loud. The obvious thing is that you are crossing an ocean toward a person you knew briefly, in a country that was at war, under conditions that made everyone brighter and more urgent and more in love than they might have been in ordinary Tuesday light. The obvious thing is that you are about to meet the Tuesday version. You all know this. You eat your serviceable food and talk about his name and his town and watch the water through the portholes, and Margaret from Bath, who has rejoined the living on day 3, says she's sure it will be fine. She says it the way people say things they are working very hard to believe. You nod. The ship rolls, the bunk creaks. Somewhere down the corridor, Colin has apparently proposed to the porthole, and a small argument is developing about whether this is cute or a problem. You go to the mess hall at noon on the second day because you are told that not eating makes the seasickness worse, which is the kind of advice that sounds reassuring until you arrive at the mess hall and smell what is on the menu. The smell is mostly cabbage. The cabbage has been served alongside something a steward describes, encouragingly, as gravy. You sit at a long table with 7 women from 3 different counties. None of you have spoken to each other before. By the end of the meal, you know 4 of their names. Margaret from Gloucestershire, who cuts everything on her plate into very small pieces and does not eat any of it. A woman named Vera from County Durham, who is carrying a photograph in her coat pocket and keeps touching it, not looking at it, just touching it, like a worry stone with a face. Joan from somewhere near Bristol, who has figured out where the tea urn is and considers this a personal victory. And a 4th woman whose name you don't catch, but who makes a dry remark about the gravy that earns a laugh from the whole table. The kind of laugh that happens when the alternative is something else entirely. Let's talk about the photograph situation. Almost everyone has one. A formal portrait taken outside a Woolworths or a church. A man in uniform with his cap at a particular angle, squinting into English light that is grey, thin, and faintly suspicious. Some of these photographs are 3 years old. A few women hold them up and squint the way you squint at a map when you suspect the road has changed. There's a version of this man waiting in New Jersey, or Ohio, or somewhere in Minnesota that you had to look up in an atlas your mother borrowed from the library because your mother had never needed to know where Minnesota was before. The crossings take 5 to 7 days in February, which is not February as a concept, but February as a physical event happening directly to your body. The North Atlantic in winter does not gently rock the ship. It has a more committed philosophy. The Queen Mary, which in better years was the kind of ship that carried film stars and diplomats in staterooms with actual curtains, is now carrying 1,279 wives and 73 children in bunks stacked 4 high in converted cargo holds. The curtains are not present. The smell is diesel and salt and the particular quality of air that develops when many people are all ill in the same enclosed space. You sleep in your coat sometimes because the bunk above you has already made its feelings known, and the coat seems like the reasonable precaution. Vera shows you the photograph after dinner. Her husband is called Dennis. He has a good face, she says, which is a thing people say when they mean he looked kind in a photograph 3 years ago under specific lighting conditions. She met him at a dance in Sunderland in the autumn of 1943. They had 8 weeks together before his unit shipped back out. 8 weeks during which the war was still loud and close, and everyone around them was making decisions at a pace that peacetime would never endorse. She is not afraid, she says. She says it a second time, which is when you know she is. The photograph goes back into the coat pocket. Vera does not look at it again that night. The mess hall fills up again at 6. The cabbage is back. It's possibly the same cabbage, entered into a new diplomatic phase. You eat it anyway because Margaret from Gloucestershire is eating hers, and if Margaret can do it, everyone can. The steward refills the tea urn without being asked, and for a moment the table is quiet in a way that feels almost like home. Not home exactly, the shape of home. The implication of home, sitting across from 6 women you didn't know this morning, in the middle of an ocean, Heading west, you arrive in New York Harbor on the morning of the 7th day. A Red Cross volunteer in a blue cap meets you at the bottom of the gangway and hands you a paper folder marked Welcome. You have not slept in a real bed in over a week, and your hair has not been washed in 8 days, and the volunteer says, brightly, that you must be excited. You hold the folder against your chest. You cannot find a polite English answer to her question. The folder is thick. Inside is a pamphlet explaining American vocabulary, specifically that Americans say sidewalk instead of pavement. There is another page about refrigerators and what they do and how to manage the temperature dial. There is a section on making change with dimes and quarters, the coins that do not have their values written on them because Americans apparently assume you already know. The folder is in effect a Lonely Planet guidebook, except the destination is your husband's mother's kitchen in Akron, and there is no section on emergency exits. You are taken by bus to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. This is where the processing happens. A woman in a uniform takes your name and your documents and your height. A medical examiner looks at your teeth for longer than you expected, with an expression that carries its own quiet opinion about wartime Britain. You smile cooperatively. He writes something down. You don't ask what. Let's talk about Margaret for a moment. She's standing 3 places ahead of you in the medical queue, still wearing the good wool coat she wore off the ship. She keeps straightening her collar, which doesn't need straightening, but her hands need somewhere to go and they've decided the collar is their project. A Red Cross worker hands her a second pamphlet. Margaret reads the first line, folds it back into the envelope, and places it in her coat pocket with the deliberate composure of a woman who has decided to receive no more information today. The collar still doesn't need straightening. Margaret straightens it again anyway. The Red Cross station has a table with orange juice and a plate of white bread with something pale and sticky spread across it. Peanut butter. You have heard of it. You have not had it before. It is sweet in a way that feels like a misunderstanding, and it clings to the roof of your mouth with the stubbornness of something that knows it's unwelcome. You eat 2 pieces because you are hungry and the week has been long, and this is apparently what America has decided breakfast is. Outside, through a window that faces west, there are cars, a great many of them. Enormous, low-slung, and faintly absurd things moving on a road so wide it doesn't look like a road so much as a decision about space. The road is roughly the size of an English market square, except in motion, and there are exactly 3 legal speeds, none of which appear to be observed. In Birmingham, a wide road fits 2 lorries going opposite directions with room to nod. This road seems to fit 6 of everything with room left over for ambition. It is the first of many moments over the next few months when America will feel less like a country and more like an argument about scale. Piju. Vera, who you met over the cabbage on day 2, gets her processing stamp at the next window. She has Dennis' photograph tucked in her coat pocket, same as she did the whole crossing. She pulls it out now, quickly looks at it once, puts it back. A small, private, and faintly painful ritual, a recalibration before the next door. Whatever is on the other side of that door is not the photograph. She knows this. She goes through anyway. You are put on a bus to Camp Kilmer in New Jersey, where the United States Army has converted a wartime training depot into the place where they verify that war brides are who they say they are. You are given a cot in a long wooden barracks. The cot has a wool blanket and a label with your husband's name on it, in case you have forgotten his name. A nurse takes your temperature. Another asks, very kindly, whether you are pregnant. Let's talk about the medical examination. It's not a medical examination. It's an inventory. A woman in a white coat works through you, the way a customs officer works through luggage, methodically, without judgment, and with the quiet authority of someone who has done this 1,100 times today. She checks your eyes, your lungs, your vaccinations. Then she gets to your teeth. The teeth are noted, not fixed, noted. American medical examiners at intake have been documenting with some consistency that arriving European brides have a higher rate of dental cavities and missing teeth than the comparable American civilian population. This is true. It is also true that you spent the last 6 years eating on a ration book, that citrus was a luxury, that a single orange at Christmas was mentioned in letters home as a notable event. The examiner writes something on your form. You smile politely. The form does not smile back. The pen clicks. The form goes into a stack with 1,100 others. A Red Cross woman named Corporal Haggerty. Her badge says Haggerty, and she has the cheerful briskness of someone who has given the same orientation 40 times and has made peace with that. Hands you a welcome packet. You already have one from the ship. Haggerty gives you a second one. It's thicker. This one has a section on American coins, a section on American vocabulary, and a page explaining that what you call a cooker is here called a stove, what you call a biscuit is here called a cookie, and what you call a vest is here a piece of underwear. Haggerty pauses while you read the vest page. She has learnt to pause there. Margaret, in the cot 2 rows down, receives her second packet, with the expression of someone accepting a penalty notice she intends to contest at a later date. She folds it precisely and puts it in her bag. She already has annotations on the first one. She is prepared for America in the way that a general is prepared for a war, thoroughly, grimly, and with awareness that the plan will not survive contact. The barracks at night smell of pine cleaner and other women's anxiety. It's a specific combination. The lights go out at 9. You lie on the cot with your husband's name above your head and think about the fact that he is somewhere between here and Pennsylvania, possibly waiting, possibly not, depending on what the army has told him and whether the army and your husband have historically been in good communication. Your train ticket will be handed to you in the morning. You don't know the town. You have the address written on an envelope in his mother's handwriting, which arrived 3 months ago and has the slightly formal quality of a letter written for an audience. The woman in the next cot is from Glasgow. She says the pine cleaner smells like a hospital. You say it smells like a school. You are both right. It smells like authority, specifically, a clean institutional surface that is telling you, gently but without ambiguity, that the part of this that belongs to the United States government is almost over. In the morning, there is powdered eggs and soft white bread and coffee so pale it looks apologetic. You eat it. You have been eating things you don't recognize for 5 days now, and your body has quietly decided to be pragmatic about the situation. The woman from Glasgow puts sugar in the coffee, then more sugar, then looks at the cup with the expression of someone trying to negotiate with it. Your paperwork is returned to you in a manila folder. Inside is the train ticket, the address on the envelope, a small pamphlet about American supermarkets, which the pamphlet notes carry everything in one location, which will be a change, and a handwritten note from a Red Cross caseworker that says simply, "Good luck with the adjustment period." It is the most honest document you've received since Southampton. You put it in your coat pocket. The bus to the train station leaves at 8:30. You pick up your case, which has your name on a tag, and you follow the line of women who are all, in their way, doing the same calculation you are, trying to remember the face of a man they married in a country that no longer exists, and wondering if the man who meets the train will match the one in the photograph. You sit on the cot at Camp Kilmer with the Red Cross packet open across your knees. The packet is 14 pages long and is titled, in cheerful capitals, A Bride's Guide to Her New Home. Page 1 explains that Americans say sidewalk instead of pavement. Page 2 explains that American kitchens contain something called a refrigerator. Page 3 explains that central heating is common and that a room in winter is not, as a rule, expected to be cold. You turn to page 4. Page 4 is about peanut butter. Not a full page, a paragraph, but a dedicated paragraph nonetheless, explaining that peanut butter is a common American foodstuff, spread on bread, enjoyed by children, and present in most homes. The whole document, you realize as you turn the page, is essentially a Lonely Planet guidebook for a country you have already irrevocably married into. The packet wants you to be prepared. The packet is, In this respect, trying its best. You read the paragraph twice and file it under things that will make sense later. Let's talk about the vocabulary section. It is 3 pages, because the problem turns out to be not that you don't speak English, but that you speak a version of English that will misfire in specific, public, and memorable ways. Knock me up in the morning means something different here. The packet explains this with the care of someone who has already watched this go wrong at a church potluck in New Jersey. A woman 2 cots down reads the relevant entry, looks up, and mouths the words again slowly. Her name is Vivian. Vivian sets the packet down and stares at the middle distance for a long moment. The appliance section is illustrated. Small line drawings show a refrigerator, an electric range, a twin-tub washing machine, and something labelled a garbage disposal that appears to be a hole in the sink with teeth. You have been managing a coal fire and a copper boiler and a cold larder since you were 13. The packet's tone is encouraging. The drawings are cheerful. You look at the garbage disposal for longer than is strictly necessary. The garbage disposal does not blink. Of course, the packet doesn't mention the things it can't diagram. It doesn't mention that American bread is soft in a way that feels slightly wrong, like holding a cloud that someone has decided to charge for. It doesn't mention that the coffee is thin, brown, warm, technically coffee, but tasting of a decision made at approximately half the effort. It doesn't mention that the supermarket you'll visit next week will contain every fruit available on Earth, in January, under fluorescent lights, and that you will stand in front of a bin of fresh oranges and feel, for reasons you can't entirely explain, a small and complicated guilt. You've spent 6 years learning that an orange is a luxury. The orange doesn't know that. A Red Cross volunteer named Corporal Adkins, not Haggerty, a different one, rounder, with a clipboard she consults even when she's not reading from it, comes through the room and asks if there are questions. There are questions. A woman from Coventry wants to know how to make change in dimes and quarters, which have no obvious relationship to each other. A woman from Edinburgh wants to know if American electric kettles are as slow as they look. Corporal Adkins writes both questions down. She doesn't answer them. She writes them down and moves on, which is a communication style you'll encounter frequently in your new country. The last page of the packet lists emergency contacts, the Red Cross, the Army Emergency Relief Office, a social worker's phone number in black ink. Below the phone number, in smaller type, it reads, "If you are experiencing distress, please speak with a Red Cross representative or your husband's family." The packet means well. The packet wrote about sidewalks. You fold the packet in half and slide it into your bag, next to the ticket, with the address in your mother-in-law's handwriting. The address is in Ohio. You have never been to Ohio. Nobody at this camp has been to Ohio, and yet Ohio is, statistically, where a very large number of you are going. You are put on a train at Pennsylvania Station on the morning of the 9th day, with your suitcase, your packet, and a meal voucher good for 1 ham sandwich at the dining car. The train is going to a town in Ohio, whose name you have practiced saying aloud 6 times since boarding. Your husband, who you last saw 7 months ago at a wedding in Surrey, is supposed to meet you at the station. The conductor passes through the carriage, punching tickets and asking you twice where you are from. The American train is large, larger than you expected, wider than the trains at home, with seats that recline in a way that seems extravagant for a Tuesday. Outside the window, New Jersey gives way to Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania goes on for considerably longer than a country should. Then Ohio begins. Ohio is flat, in a way that England is not flat. England has hedgerows and gentle interruptions. Ohio has a sky that begins at the ground and does not stop. The ham sandwich arrives on a plate the size of a dinner table, with a mound of something white, creamy, and faintly suspicious on the side that turns out to be coleslaw. The bread is soft. The ham is thick and slightly sweet. The coleslaw tastes like a salad that gave up partway through and decided to become a condiment instead. You eat all of it, because you are hungry, and also because wasting food is a habit your body won't break for at least another decade. Somewhere in the middle of Ohio, A woman named Patsy in the seat across the aisle leans over and asks if you're one of the English girls. You say yes. She nods with the gravity of someone confirming a diagnosis. Her son-in-law, she explains, is also a veteran. She says this last word slowly, the way people say it when they mean something more complicated than the word itself contains. She offers you a piece of hard candy from her coat pocket and goes back to her magazine. You hold the candy in your palm for a moment before eating it. It tastes like cherry. It tastes like nothing you've had before. Both things are true. You watch the fields come past the window in regular intervals, and somewhere around the third or fourth one you do the math. You met your husband in the autumn of 1944. You knew him for 4 months before the wedding, of which perhaps 11 days were spent in the same room. The letters were good. The letters were, frankly, better than most of the conversations. And now there is a station coming up whose name you have been practicing, and a man on a platform who wrote those letters, and the two things are connected but not identical. The Red Cross packet did not have a section for this. The packet covered refrigerators. Refrigerators are easier. The station at Akron is smaller than Pennsylvania Station, in the way that all things are smaller than Pennsylvania Station. Your husband is on the platform in a brown jacket you don't recognize. He is thinner than the photograph. He waves. You wave back from the window, and for a moment you are both waving at each other from different sides of a pane of glass, which is either romantic or a reasonable summary of the next several years, depending on when you're asked. He carries your suitcase. He has a car. The car is a 1941 Ford, with a dent above the rear wheel and a pine tree air freshener hanging from the mirror that smells nothing like a pine tree. He says you look well. You say the crossing was fine. He says his mother has made a pot roast. You say that's lovely. The conversation has the structure of something real and the density of a telegram. The house is on Maple Street, which is called Maple Street because there are no maples. His mother, whose name is Mrs. Elsbeth Garfield, opens the screen door before you reach the porch. She looks at you the way customs officers look at a declaration form. Not unkindly, just thoroughly. She says you must be exhausted. You say you're quite well, and she takes quite well to mean something more enthusiastic than you intended. And somewhere in that small gap between British and American, quite is the rest of the year. You step off the train at the Akron station on the morning of the 10th day, holding the suitcase in one hand and the packet in the other. A man in a brown overcoat is standing on the platform. He looks like your husband. He has the same nose and the same jaw and the same eyes. He is also a stone heavier than you remember, and his hair is starting to thin at the temples, and he is holding flowers that he has clearly bought from the kiosk on platform 2. The flowers are carnations, not roses. You note this without deciding what it means. He says your name. You say his. You hug in the way that people hug when they haven't touched in 14 months and are doing it in public in Ohio, which is to say, briefly and with great structural tension. He takes the suitcase. You keep the packet, because the packet has your documents, and you have learned to keep your documents on your person at all times, the way some people learn to keep a house key. The courtship in total was 4 months. Of those 4 months, approximately 6 weeks were spent in the same physical location. The rest was letters, and the letters were good. He wrote well, in his careful American cursive, and you wrote back on whatever paper the landlady had, but letters are edited things. Letters don't have a stone on them. Letters don't thin at the temples. You're not disappointed exactly. You're just recalibrating. He has a car. Of course he has a car. Everyone in America has a car, which you already knew, but knowing it and watching him load your entire life into the boot, the trunk, of a green Ford while speaking too quickly about something called the turnpike is a different experience. You sit in the passenger seat on the left-hand side, which is the wrong side, and the road is moving on the wrong side, and every approaching car briefly looks like a crisis. You don't say this. You look out the window at the width of everything. The drive takes 40 minutes. In those 40 minutes he tells you about his job prospects, his father's health, a neighbour named Dale who has apparently done something worth mentioning twice, and the fact that his mother has made a pot roast. You receive all of this, calmly, nodding at what seem like nod-shaped pauses. At some point he says you're going to love it about something, the house or the neighbourhood or the pot roast. You've already lost the referent, and you say yes in the tone that means you are listening, rather than the tone that means you agree. And he doesn't notice the difference, and you file that away too. Mrs. Elspeth Garfield. You met her at the door last night, but today is the first full morning, is in the kitchen when you arrive. She turns from the stove, with the wooden spoon still in her hand, and gives you the smile she has prepared for this occasion. Broad, rehearsed, and faintly anxious. It is a good smile. It is doing a lot of work. She says something about the pot roast, and then she says something about how you must be exhausted, and then she says something about the guest room, which is now your room, and you say quite, meaning very, meaning absolutely, meaning yes, and she turns back to the stove with a small adjustment in her posture that you will spend 6 weeks interpreting. The pot roast arrives at 6. It is enormous. It is the size of a small continent. You have not seen that quantity of meat assembled on a single plate since before the war, and the correct response to it is apparently to eat it without visible emotion, which you manage. There are also rolls, soft white rolls, the kind that taste like warm nothing, that the Americans seem to find essential. A pat of butter sits on a dish, not margarine. Butter. You butter a roll and eat it, and for a moment you're back in Surrey in 1938, before anyone needed to measure anything. Then Mrs. Garfield asks if you'd like to see the Frigidaire. She opens it with the pride of someone presenting an award. Inside, a ham, a jug of milk, leftover something in a bowl, 3 kinds of condiment, and what appears to be a full stick of celery standing upright in a glass of water like a flag of organised living. The celery is standing very straight. You have arrived. You are taken in your husband's father's car to a 2-story clapboard house on a residential street, with a maple tree out front, which is the house where you will be living for the next 11 months. Your husband's mother meets you at the door. She has been waiting at the door for 40 minutes. She is a small woman in a floral apron, and she embraces you in a way that makes it clear she has rehearsed embracing you for several weeks now. The house smells of pine cleaner and pot roast, and a particular brand of warmth that has nothing to do with fire, central heating. It is not heat exactly. It is an opinion the air has been instructed to hold, with the unwavering, uncomplaining, slightly bureaucratic conviction of a small Midwestern utility. You have read about central heating in the welcome packet. Reading about it and standing inside it are different experiences. Back home, the cold lives in the walls. Here the walls are sealed against it, insulated, and the air is dry and pressurized in a way that makes your nose itch by the second afternoon. You keep reaching for a cardigan you don't need. The bedroom is not your bedroom. It's your husband's bedroom, which means there is a pennant on the wall for a team you don't recognize, a shelf of model aircraft, and a bedspread. His mother chose in 1938 when he was 16, quilted, faded, and aggressively masculine. You are sleeping under a 16-year-old's bedspread in a 16-year-old's room, and the aircraft are all watching. The aircraft do not blink. The pennant does not move. Your husband's mother, her name is Barbara, but she says to call her mum, and she says it with a warmth so firm it is not quite optional, operates the kitchen with the precision of a field commander who has already decided where everything goes. The icebox, which is not an icebox but a full Frigidaire, with 2 doors and a light that comes on like a small sunrise when you open it, holds more food than your mother's entire pantry held in the best week of 1943. There are 4 cuts of meat. There is orange juice in a glass pitcher. There is a ceramic bowl of something labelled Jello salad that contains, as far as you can determine, suspended vegetables in a state of enforced cheerfulness. You do not ask about the Jello salad. You learn early that some things in Barbara's kitchen are not questions. Mealtimes are at 6 sharp. Barbara sets the table with a speed and certainty that suggests the table has been waiting for you to arrive and fail to set it correctly. She serves the roast. She watches you eat the roast. She watches you in the way you might watch someone reading a very important letter addressed to you, with visible effort not to intervene. You say it's lovely. You say it's really lovely. Superlatives keep arriving, slightly panicked, because in England, quite nice is a compliment, and here you've learned it registers as mild disappointment, which means you are now overcorrecting, and dinner has become a performance of enthusiasm that leaves you tired in your shoulders by the time it ends. A neighbour named Pat Holloway appears at the back door on the third morning with a dish of something covered in foil, which she hands to Barbara while looking at you with the expression of a woman attending a moderately interesting zoo exhibit. She says, "Is she settling in?" while you are standing directly in front of her. She means it warmly. Pat Holloway always means everything warmly. This is not comforting. You write to your mother. The letter takes 2 weeks each way, so by the time she writes back to say she's glad you've arrived safely, you've already been there a month. You are conducting a correspondence with your own past. Your mother asks if the Americans are friendly. You write that they are very friendly. You write it carefully because it is true, and also because you don't quite have the words yet for what else it is. Over 60% of war brides arriving in 1946 were living exactly like this, not in their own home, not in a flat, not in anything with a door that belonged to them, but in someone else's house, with someone else's kitchen schedule, and someone else's opinion about how tea should be made. Barbara makes the tea in a mug, with the bag still in it, and when you fish the bag out after 30 seconds, she watches you the way she watches the roast. The tea is thin. It is the colour of a mild concern. You drink it without comment because you are a person of considerable dignity, and also because you have nowhere else to go. You are shown to the small bedroom at the top of the stairs, which used to be your husband's room when he was a boy, and which contains a single iron bedstead, a chest of drawers, and a framed photograph of your husband at age 12 holding a fish. You are told that the bathroom is across the hall and that the family takes breakfast at 7:30. Your mother-in-law closes the door very gently behind her. You sit down on the edge of the bed. The fish is a large fish. He looks proud of it. You have known this man for 5 months, 4 of which consisted primarily of correspondence, and this is the longest uninterrupted time you've spent in his presence since the dock at Southampton. He is downstairs right now, probably in a chair, probably with a newspaper, in the same house where he spent every childhood winter, and you are in that childhood, sitting on its springs. The mattress is not a bad mattress. It is a perfectly reasonable mattress, by the standards of a boy who grew up sleeping on it, which is to say it has a topography, lumpy, lopsided and faintly archaeological, a central ridge with the structural integrity of a small Welsh hill, 2 shallow valleys, a soft spot on the left side that has been soft for approximately a decade. The springs register your presence with a sound like a small elderly opinion. You shift. They comment again. The room is warm. This is the thing you keep noticing, that the room is simply warm, not because someone fed a fire, not because a coal scuttle was brought up, but because warmth is just what American rooms do. In Birmingham, warmth was an event. You dress toward it. Here, it arrives without announcement, like a guest who doesn't knock. You grew up in a house where getting dressed in January was its own athletic challenge, where your breath showed until March, where the windows wept condensation every morning onto the sill. This room is 68 degrees and does not care. On the chest of drawers there is a doily, a small ceramic dog, and a glass of water someone has placed there for you. Barbara, probably. The water is cold and clear and there is too much of it, the glass nearly full to the rim, in the way of a household that does not portion water. You grew up portioning water. You grew up portioning everything. The glass sits there, generous and slightly accusatory. The bathroom across the hall is yours between 8 and 8:15 in the morning, which you will learn tomorrow. Tonight the schedule hasn't been explained yet, which means tonight the bathroom simply exists, quietly holding the information that there is a schedule, waiting for you to find out the wrong way. The towel on the rack is yours. Barbara has placed a yellow one there specifically, neatly folded, which is thoughtful in a way that also communicates exactly how much has been thought about. Marjorie Dawes, who arrived in Youngstown 18 months before you, wrote in her last letter that the hardest part wasn't the language or the food or the roads or even the in-laws. She said the hardest part was the quiet of the first night, not peaceful quiet. The other kind, the kind where the house makes small sounds, the furnace ticking, a floorboard settling in the hallway, your husband's footsteps on the stairs pausing, then continuing past your door, and every sound is a room you don't know yet. You read that letter twice on the ship. You didn't entirely understand it then. You understand it now. You do not cry. This is worth noting. You have been holding the not crying since the dock, which at this point is a structural achievement. You look at the 12-year-old with the fish. He is grinning. He has no idea. You discover, on your first morning in the house, that the bathroom across the hall is shared between 5 people, which is one more person than the bathroom contains square feet. There is a schedule. The schedule is not written down anywhere. The schedule is enforced through a system of small coughs in the hallway and the sound of the door being tried at 20-second intervals from 6:40 until 8. You learn the schedule the way you learn the tube map, except this time there is no map. The bathroom itself has pink tile, not subtle pink, committed pink, bright, glossy and faintly ceremonial, the kind of pink that suggests someone made a decision in 1947 and has not questioned it since. There is a rubber bath mat shaped like a fish. The fish has a face. The fish appears to be coping. The cabinet above the sink belongs to everyone and therefore to no one, which means you have arranged your things. Pond's cold cream, a bar of Pears soap you carried from Southampton in tissue paper, on the edge of the sink, where they balance with the confidence of something about to fall. Pauline, your mother-in-law, has a bottle of Listerine that occupies the cabinet's entire middle shelf. It is very large. It has been there long enough to have a shadow. You have 6 minutes. This is not told to you. You deduce it from the door being tried on the 3rd morning while you are still in the middle of washing your hair. The trial is gentle, considerate even. This is somehow worse. Back home, the bathroom was off the kitchen, and the hot water came from a geyser that made a sound like a man being surprised. You waited for the geyser. You negotiated with it. You did not have 6 minutes because the geyser had not yet decided if today was the day. Here, the hot water arrives instantly, from everywhere, in unlimited quantity, and you are still not fast enough. The pipes don't complain. The pressure doesn't drop. The system works perfectly, and still the door is tried. Robert's father, Don, shaves at 6:45 on the dot. You know this because the medicine cabinet has a magnetic closure that announces itself through the wall with a small decisive click, which is Don's equivalent of a starting pistol. He's in and out in 8 minutes. He holds the door for you without looking at you, the way a person holds a door for someone they recognize but cannot currently name. Every morning, the door extended at arm's length, the eyes already elsewhere. Barbara is the problem. Not in a dramatic sense, in the sense that Barbara is 17 and spends 22 minutes with the door locked and emerges looking exactly the same as when she went in. You have timed this. You have timed this because you have nothing else to do at 7 in the morning except stand in the hall in your dressing gown, listening to the faint sound of someone brushing their hair repeatedly on the other side of a wall. You are used to waiting. Waiting is not the issue. The issue is that you are waiting in a hallway you don't live in, outside a bathroom you don't belong to, in a house where everyone is perfectly polite, and none of them have asked you a single question about England since Tuesday. The hallway has a runner rug in a pattern that appears to be leaves, or possibly fish, it's hard to say without kneeling, and a framed needlepoint that reads "Bless this home" in blue thread. The needlepoint has also been here long enough to have a shadow. By the 4th day, you have your 6 minutes timed to the sound of Don's cabinet click. You are in, you are out. You have not inconvenienced anyone. Pauline says good morning from the kitchen doorway, and you say good morning back, and both of you mean it as much as you can at 7:15. With wet hair, you return to your room. You sit on the edge of the iron bed. You listen to the house settle into its morning noise. The percolator, the radio at low volume, the screen door's small protest. The bathroom schedule is manageable. That's not the part that's hard. You go downstairs at 7:30 on the second morning to help your mother-in-law with breakfast, because that is what a daughter-in-law in your country does. Your mother-in-law looks at you the way she would look at a small bird that has flown in through the window. She tells you very kindly that the kitchen is a one-woman operation. She tells you to sit at the table. She tells you that you are her guest, which is, in this house, a more complicated word than you had previously realized. Her name is Pauline. Pauline has run this kitchen since 1931, and she has opinions that predate the war, the Depression, and at least one president. The kitchen is not a kitchen. The kitchen is a small, well-organized, quietly ceremonial, Pauline-administered jurisdiction in which you are a permanent visitor. The Frigidaire stands against the wall like a small white appliance that has been told it is important, and it hums at a frequency that suggests it agrees. You have never owned a Frigidaire. You grew up with a cold larder and a schedule and a ration book, and you knew where everything was, because there was never very much of anything to lose track of. Pauline's Frigidaire has a drawer just for vegetables. It has shelves inside the door. It has a small, frosted compartment at the top that contains a block of something that is not quite ice but behaves like ice, and you do not ask about it, because you can tell the Frigidaire would rather you didn't. The bread is white, soft, and faintly apologetic. It compresses between your fingers like something that hasn't made up its mind yet about being bread. Back home, bread had texture. It pushed back. This bread is apologetic. You eat it anyway, because Pauline cuts it in neat squares and places it in a little wicker basket, and looks at you with the cautious warmth of someone who hopes you'll approve, but has already decided the bread is correct regardless. The toast comes out of an electric toaster that operates on a hair trigger spring mechanism, and the first time it fires you jump visibly, and Pauline pretends not to notice. The toaster noticed. The spring resets. The basket sits there with its neat squares. Of course there is peanut butter. There is always peanut butter, sitting in its jar like an ingredient that has mistaken itself for a main course. You try it on Pauline's apologetic toast, and it sticks to the roof of your mouth in a way that is sweet and salty simultaneously, which is not a combination you had been asked to consider before arriving in this country. In England, a thing that is sweet stays sweet. A thing that is salty gets on with it. Peanut butter is apparently pursuing a third option, and everyone here acts like this is perfectly fine. Breakfast is eggs and orange juice from a can of frozen concentrate that Pauline mixes with a wooden spoon, and the orange juice tastes both more and less like orange juice than you were expecting, which is a sentence that wouldn't have made sense to you 6 weeks ago. It is January. The oranges are not in season anywhere near Ohio. Pauline has 4 cans of orange concentrate in the Frigidaire, and she buys more on Thursday without thinking about it, the way you once thought about butter. You watch her do this and feel something you can't quite name. Not envy. Exactly. More like the moral discomfort of a person who has spent 6 years being told that wanting more was unpatriotic. The kitchen smells of pine cleaner, and something sweet from the oven, and the linoleum is yellow and entirely without apology. Everything is warm. The central heating breathes through a grill in the floor, with a low papery exhale, and the warmth is constant and ambient, and, after a lifetime of coal fires that demanded tending, slightly unsettling. A fire you could manage. A fire had moods. This warmth simply exists, like wallpaper. You sit at Pauline's table and eat your eggs, and do not touch the peanut butter again, and smile when she refills your coffee, which is thin and pale and served in a mug the size of a small bucket. By 8:15, Pauline is washing up. You offer to dry. She hands you a dish towel, as though handing you a test. You dry carefully. You put the plate in the wrong cabinet. Pauline moves it, gently, without comment. Both of you understand that this is going to happen every morning for a while, and neither of you says so out loud, because the kitchen is a one-woman operation, and you are still her guest. You are introduced to the Frigidaire on the third day of your residence in Akron, Ohio. The Frigidaire is a tall white box that hums in the corner of the kitchen and contains at any given moment more food than your mother kept in her cold larder during all of 1943. Your mother-in-law opens the door of the Frigidaire and shows you the egg shelf. She shows you the butter compartment. She shows you, with particular pride, the freezer at the top of the box. The freezer has a handle. You pull the handle. A small avalanche of frost falls into your palm. Inside, there is a block of ice cream in a cardboard container the size of a small Bible. Your mother-in-law, Pauline, you must remember to call her Pauline, watches your face while you look at the ice cream. She is looking for something. Gratitude, probably, or wonder. You give her a polite smile and she nods, satisfied, as though the demonstration has concluded. It has not concluded. There are 2 more shelves. Pauline has a technique for the Frigidaire door. She opens it with one hand, locates the item, retrieves it, and closes the door again in a single smooth motion, the whole operation lasting maybe 4 seconds. She does this the way you breathe, without thought, without ceremony. You watch her do it from across the kitchen and feel, not for the first time this week, like someone who has wandered into a film already halfway through, and is now pretending to follow the plot. The freezer block deserves attention. The ice cream is called Neapolitan, and it comes in 3 flavors arranged in stripes, brown, white, and faintly suspicious pink. Pauline slices it. She does not scoop it. She cuts clean rectangular slabs from the block with a knife, like a person slicing cheese, like this is a completely normal thing to do to ice cream. You eat your slab. It is cold. It is very sweet. It is nothing like the ice cream you had twice as a child, at the seaside, in the brief window before the war made ice cream a bureaucratic impossibility. You do not say this. The Frigidaire hums the entire time. It has been humming since you arrived. It will continue humming. The hum is confident, low, and self-satisfied. The hum of an appliance that has never once rationed anything and could rent itself out as a small municipal dairy if asked. You think about the cold larder at home, the marble shelf, the muslin cloth over the milk, the particular arithmetic of making a small amount of butter stretch across a week without anyone noticing. Britain would not lift all its wartime rationing for another 8 years, a fact your body apparently still carries, because standing in front of an open Frigidaire makes you feel something that isn't quite guilt, but is adjacent to it. Fresh eggs in a row, a whole block of cheddar, half a roast chicken, just sitting there, uncovered, in the 2nd week of January, as though January has no opinions about this. The Frigidaire is, you decide, basically a Costco membership in a single white box, except the membership is your husband's mother and she has not asked whether you'd like to enroll. Margaret, the woman in the 3rd floor flat back home who sometimes slipped you an extra quarter pound of mince because her son was a butcher, would not believe the Frigidaire. You're not sure you believe the Frigidaire, and you're standing in front of it. Pauline shows you how to refill the ice cube trays. You fill them. You spill some water. She hands you a dishcloth with the composure of a woman who has been handing dishcloths to other people her entire life. The Frigidaire hums. Outside, it is 11 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sky is a colour Ohio apparently considers normal. You are introduced to the Bendix twin-tube washing machine on the 4th day in the small porch off the back of the kitchen, and you are given a 40-minute demonstration that begins with the words, "Now this part is the agitator." Your mother-in-law uses the agitator the way a concert pianist uses a pedal. There are dials, there are settings, there is a hose that connects to the kitchen tap by a method nobody fully understands and that has never, your mother-in-law tells you, gone wrong. The machine has 2 tubs. This is the first thing. The left tub washes. The right tub spins. You move the clothes from one to the other by hand, with tongs, because the water is hot enough to matter. The tongs are kept on a hook. The hook is above the machine. The machine knows where the tongs are. You do not, yet. Back home, laundry day involved a copper boiler, a washboard, and a commitment to the process that took most of Monday. The copper boiler sat on the stove and required tending the way a slow fire requires tending. Patience, attention, a certain grim respect. The Bendix does not ask for any of this. It asks only that you respect the dial settings, mind the hose connection, and transfer the laundry at the correct interval. It is, your mother-in-law explains, very modern. The Bendix has opinions about being respected. She demonstrates the spin cycle. The machine achieves a frequency that suggests it is attempting to leave the porch with the structural integrity of a small white municipal building during a minor earthquake. A small shelf above it rattles. A bottle of blue liquid called Sal Suds slides 2 inches to the left. Your mother-in-law places one hand flat on top of the machine, the way you'd settle a nervous horse, and it does seem to help. You file this away. Physical contact is apparently part of the operating instructions. The Sal Sud slides back. The shelf settles. The horse stays. What you're washing isn't much. You have 2 dresses, a skirt, a cardigan, and the things you wore on the ship, which still carry a faint suggestion of the North Atlantic, salty, mildewed, and faintly diesel. Your mother-in-law has more laundry than this by Tuesday afternoon, generated by a household of 4 adults moving through an American house with its central heat and its synthetic fabrics and its inexhaustible appetite for clean things. You are used to wearing a dress for 3 days. This information does not transfer. Margaret, the neighbour from 2 doors down, who has a daughter-in-law from Coventry and therefore considers herself an authority, comes around on Wednesday to ask how you're finding the machine. She is holding a casserole dish covered in foil, and she sets it on the counter without asking, and then looks at the Bendix the way people look at a municipal monument, acknowledging it without really seeing it. You tell her it's very good. She nods. She says you'll get used to it. She picks up the casserole dish again, decides it can stay, and leaves. The hose connection does, eventually, go wrong. Not dramatically. It simply loosens at the tap end, releasing a steady trickle of hot water across the porch floor for the better part of a rinse cycle before anyone notices. Your mother-in-law does not say anything about this. She reconnects the hose with the efficiency of someone who knew this would happen eventually and had prepared herself emotionally. The machine resumes. The porch dries. The subject is closed. You write to your mother about the Bendix. You describe the 2 tubs, the agitator, the spin cycle that rattles the shelf. You describe Sal Suds. You try to explain that the laundry is done in 40 minutes instead of most of Monday, and that this is somehow not a relief but a mild disorientation, like being handed back an afternoon you had already made plans for. The letter takes 11 days to reach Surrey. By the time your mother reads about the Bendix, you will have used it 7 more times. You will still be introducing yourself to the hose. You sit down to Sunday dinner at 1:30 on your first Sunday in the house, at a table laid for 7, with a centrepiece of waxed fruit that your mother-in-law has been polishing since Friday. The dinner consists of a roast, mashed potatoes, gravy, green beans from a can, and a dish of something orange that is called sweet potato casserole and is topped with marshmallows. Everyone holds hands while your father-in-law says grace. Then someone passes you the peanut butter. You take it. You hold it. Begin there. The jar is warm from sitting near the stove, and the surface inside is faintly oily, and the smell is something between a biscuit tin and a headache. You have been told this is a condiment. You have also been told it goes on bread. Both of these statements are technically true, and together they explain nothing. The table itself is a kind of geography. There's the roast, which you recognize. There are the green beans, which you also recognize, though theirs have surrendered in a way yours never would. There's a bowl of something white, fluffy, and faintly alarming that turns out to be a salad of marshmallows, tinned pineapple, and cream cheese, which has been given the name of a specific US state as though that state endorses it. And then there is the sweet potato casserole, which is a dessert that has been placed next to the gravy with complete confidence. Nobody at the table finds this remarkable. You find it extremely remarkable. You find it so remarkable that you take a small spoonful and eat it without expression, which is possibly the most heroic thing you have done since leaving Southampton. Dorothy, your mother-in-law, serves with the efficiency of someone who has fed this particular table for 22 years and isn't planning to discuss it. She lifts the ladle, sets the portion, moves on. Her wrist has a practiced arc. She doesn't ask how much you want. She already knows, which is interesting, because she's never met you before last Thursday. Your husband sits across from you, which is also new. You have eaten perhaps 16 meals with this man, total counting the ones in England where you split a bun in a pub doorway because there wasn't room inside. He is eating the sweet potato casserole with the ease of someone who grew up next to it, which he did. He grew up next to all of this. This is his normal. The marshmallows are his normal. At home, and you still call it that, even though you're not supposed to anymore, Sunday dinner was a production measured in days. The meat came on Friday if the butcher had it. The ration book came out. Your mother stood at the range for 3 hours on Sunday morning, and the kitchen got a particular smell. Coal smoke and dripping and something roasting slowly. That meant the week was ending and starting at the same time. The table was smaller. The portions were smaller. The fruit bowl held actual fruit, not wax replicas buffed to a shine. Here the refrigerator holds enough food for a siege. You opened it yesterday looking for milk, and stood in front of it for a moment too long. The cold air came out, and the light came on, and there were oranges in January. Actual oranges. 3 of them. Just sitting there on a wire shelf. Not rationed, not special, just oranges. You closed the door carefully, as though they might escape. The green beans come around a second time. You take more. This is apparently the correct response, because Dorothy makes a small sound of approval, and your father-in-law says your name slightly louder than necessary, which is how he shows he likes you. His name is Gerald. Gerald has opinions about the Truman administration and about how gravy should pour, and so far those are the 2 things you know about him with confidence. After the main course there is pie. Then there is cake. Then someone brings out a plate of cookies that are called snickerdoodles, which is a word you have to hear twice before you believe it's real. You eat the snickerdoodle. It's fine. It's actually quite good. You don't say this out loud because quite good means something different here, and you learned that at Camp Kilmer from a packet that also explained what a sidewalk was. The cookie is good. The table is full. The waxed oranges in the centerpiece gleam under the overhead light like tiny decorative accusations. You push your chair back half an inch. Your stomach has not been this full since 1939, and it isn't entirely sure what to do about the situation. The waxed oranges keep gleaming. Dorothy starts clearing plates with the same practiced wrist. You stand to help. Dorothy raises one hand, very politely, very firmly, and tells you to sit back down. You are sent to the grocery store on Tuesday morning with a list of 7 items and a $5 bill, because your mother-in-law has decided that you must learn the American way of shopping. The grocery store is called the A&P and is the size of a small English railway station. You stand at the entrance for 40 seconds before you understand that you are expected to take a basket and walk past the items in person, picking each one up with no shopkeeper behind a counter to ask. In England, you told Mr. Beecham what you wanted, and Mr. Beecham found it. Mr. Beecham also told you what he didn't have, which was often, and you adjusted your plans accordingly, and that was simply Tuesday. Here, everything is available, stacked floor to ceiling in quantities that feel slightly accusatory. The whole arrangement is essentially a Whole Foods, except 30 years early and with the moral weight of a freshly imported orange in January. 16 kinds of tinned soup, 7 formats of corn, an entire aisle that is, as far as you can determine, just bread, soft, white, and aggressively pre-sliced, sealed in bags so clean they look surgical. You find the flour without much trouble. The sugar. A block of butter from a cold case that exhales at you when you open it. A small, refrigerated breath that still catches you off guard. Because at home the butter sat on a dish and had an opinion about the weather. The butter here has no opinions. It is in a box. It is always cold. It does not care what month it is. The list says Crisco. You have never heard of Crisco. You walk up one aisle and down the next, and a woman named Peggy, you know her name because it's on a red plastic badge pinned to her chest, asks if you need help, and you say yes, you're looking for Crisco, and she takes you directly to it, without hesitation, as if the location of Crisco is the kind of knowledge she was born with. It is a large white tin. It contains what appears to be a solid cloud. You put it in your basket and don't ask. The register requires coins, dimes, nickels, quarters, which are all the same colour and refuse to sort themselves by size in any logical order, unlike shillings, which at least had the decency to be larger when they were worth more. You count the change very carefully while the woman behind you in line shifts her weight. Her name is not on a badge. She doesn't need one. She has a look that communicates everything. You get home 11 minutes later than Dorothy expected. Dorothy doesn't say this. She just takes the bag, checks the items against the original list and says, "You got the large Crisco." She says it neutrally. She says it the way a geologist describes a fault line, factually, without drama, and with full awareness of what it means for the surrounding landscape. The $5 bill comes back to you with $2.40 in change. You sit with the coins in your palm. A year ago in Shropshire, $2.40 would have been enough for a week of careful shopping, and you would have known every item by name, and the shopkeeper by his dog's name too. Here, you spent it on a cloud in a tin, and a bag of bread no one had to slice. You put the coins on the windowsill next to the African violet that belongs to Dorothy, and think about writing your mother about the bread. Then you think about what your mother would say about the bread, and you decide to write about the weather instead. You reach the till at the A&P with 7 items in your basket, and you place them on the rubber belt, and the cashier tells you, in the friendliest possible voice, that the total is $4.73. You hold out the $5 bill. The cashier rings the till and gives you back, in a slow and patient stream, 2 quarters, 2 dimes, a nickel, and 3 pennies. The woman behind you in the queue is starting to develop opinions about the speed of this transaction. Back home, you knew every coin by touch. The chunky 12-sided 3-penny bit, the big soft copper penny that got warm in your coat pocket, the florin, which was 2 shillings, which was 24 pennies, which made sense if you'd grown up with it, and made no sense at all if you were trying to explain it to anyone who hadn't. Britain's coins had weight and logic and a small portrait of the king on one side, and you trusted them the way you trust a route you've walked 100 times in the dark. American coins have no such relationship with you. They're thin and silver and light, and the dime is inexplicably smaller than the nickel it is worth, twice as much as. Nobody has explained this. You're not sure it can be explained. The quarter is a reasonable coin, heavy, ridged, and faintly trustworthy. It is large enough to find, round enough to count, and 25 cents of something is a measurable portion of $1. You can work with a quarter. The dime, however, has the energy of a small bureaucratic insult, smooth on the edge, barely there in the palm, worth 10 cents despite being the approximate size of a button that fell off something unimportant. You keep sorting them by feel and getting it wrong. The woman behind you in line last Tuesday made a sound. Not a word. A sound. The dime again. The dime. Every time. You have started keeping a small notebook. Not for the coins themselves. You've more or less committed those to memory. But for the prices, which follow a logic you're still reverse engineering. Bread is 19 cents. A tin of Campbell's tomato soup is 11 cents. A pound of ground beef is 43 cents. Petrol, gas, is something like 20 cents a gallon, which means nothing to you because you don't drive. Back home, prices were stabilized by the ration book, and before that by the counter at the grocer's, where Mr. Tibbet would tell you the total, and you paid it without question because he was Mr. Tibbet, and it wasn't negotiable. Here the price is printed on a sticker, which is a different kind of conversation. The price is still not negotiable. The sticker just makes this seem like your idea. A woman named Peggy from the Baptist church 2 streets over took you to the A&P your 3rd week here and stood beside you at the register with the structural confidence of a long-time postmistress overseeing a queue of out-of-towners. She watched you count out change, corrected you once, silently, by tapping the quarter you'd set aside and indicating with her chin that it should go back in your purse. She didn't explain why. You assume you were overpaying. Peggy comes from Indiana and does not suffer avoidable arithmetic. You like her very much. The thing nobody tells you, the thing that doesn't appear in the Red Cross welcome packet between the entry on refrigerators and the one about the word sidewalk, is that the currency isn't just coins and bills. It's the whole texture of a transaction, whether you hand things over or bag them yourself, whether you make small talk with the cashier or not, whether you say thank you once or twice, or whether once is enough. At home, leaving a shop required a small, verbal ceremony. Here the cashier is already saying, "Have a nice day" to the person behind you before you've touched your bag. The exit happens faster than you're prepared for. You stand briefly at the end of the belt while the transaction completes itself around you, and then you are outside with your groceries and your change and a vague sense that something social just happened that you didn't fully participate in. Your husband collects his weekly allowance from the local Veterans Administration office on Friday afternoons, in cash, at a long brass-railed counter that he stands at next to 7 other men in their late 20s wearing the same brown overcoats. The allowance is $20, which sounds like a lot until you understand what $20 buys in Akron in March of 1946. He folds the bills carefully into his wallet on the walk home. He does not, at any point, mention the wallet to you. The $20 is technically a government program, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, administered with great, dutiful, and slightly bored efficiency by a clerk named Gerald, or possibly Dale, who has a stamp and isn't afraid to use it. The program is called the 52-20 Club, which sounds like a golf society, but is in fact $20 a week for up to 52 weeks, while your husband figures out what to do with himself. In 2024 terms, that's roughly $310. In 1946 terms, it covers groceries, bus fare, one modest bill, and a kind of low-frequency financial anxiety that settles into your molars. You know about the allowance, the way you know about the weather, generally, and from inference. You did not see the paperwork. The paperwork was not presented for review. Your husband's mother, Vera, knows about it, because Vera knows everything that enters this house, including you. Vera runs the kitchen on a schedule that is not posted anywhere, but is nonetheless absolute. Breakfast at 7, lunch cleared by 12:30, dinner at 5:30, not 6. You have tried 6. 6 does not work for Vera. 6 produces a particular expression on Vera's face, polite, steady, just slightly load-bearing, that you have come to think of as the municipal disapproval face. She wears it the same way she wears her good cardigan, for occasions. You count. In your head, on the walk back from the corner store, you don't have a bank account. Your name is not on the household account. You are living inside a financial arrangement that has edges you can't quite see, the way you can't see all 4 walls of a room in the dark. You need stockings. You need a stamp to write to your mother. You need, occasionally, something for yourself that isn't borrowed or rationed or quietly decided for you. You ask your husband. Your husband says, "Hell sort it." Sorting, it has a timeline that remains unspecified. A woman named Margaret Howell, who arrived from Coventry the previous November and now lives 4 streets over in her husband's aunt's spare room, tells you at a church social that she keeps a small amount back from the grocery change. Not stealing. Managing. She says it the way a surveyor describes a property line. Factual, precise, and faintly ceremonial. A thing that exists whether or not anyone acknowledges it. She's been doing it since January. She has $4.70 in a tin behind the flour canister. The flour canister is a rooster. You go home and look at your own flour canister. It's also a rooster. Nobody has explained the rooster agenda. The rooster is unbothered. Back in England, under rationing, money had a kind of dignity to it, not because there was more of it, but because the limits were public and shared and not your personal failure. Everyone had the same ration book. The shortage was a civic condition, not a domestic one. Here, in a country where the shelves are full and the Frigidaire hums along the back wall of Vera's kitchen like it's very pleased with itself, the scarcity is quieter and harder to name. You have everything you need. The everything is all in someone else's name. You sit down at the small writing desk in your bedroom on Sunday afternoons to write the letter home. On the airmail paper your mother sent you in her last package, which is so thin you can see the next page through the one you are writing on, each letter takes you 2 hours. You write about the weather. You write about the Frigidaire. You do not write about the kitchen, or the bathroom schedule, or the way your husband sometimes looks at you across the dinner table. The airmail paper is blue and it weighs almost nothing. This is intentional. Heavier paper costs more to send, and the letter is already going to cost you 11 cents and 2 weeks, which is the going rate for telling your mother you are fine. She already knows you are fine. You always say you are fine. The letter is not really about being fine. Most of what you write is the supermarket, because the supermarket is genuinely remarkable, and you can write about it without lying. You write that there are 17 varieties of tinned soup, which there are, and that the oranges are available in January, which they are, and that a whole bag of white flour costs less than a shilling's worth of anything you can name. Your mother writes back that this sounds wonderful. She means it sincerely. You fold her letter into the desk drawer and feel something you don't have a word for yet. A transatlantic phone call costs $12 for 3 minutes, which is roughly what your husband draws in 3 days from the government while he looks for work. You have used the telephone once. Your mother cried the entire time, and you spent most of the 3 minutes saying yes, mum, and no, mum, while his mother stood in the hallway outside and didn't quite hover. The call lasted 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You know, because you watched the clock on the kitchen wall the entire time. The one shaped like a sunburst that has never once told the correct hour. You write every Sunday without fail, on the same blue paper, with the same blunt, careful, and slightly performative cheerfulness, because not writing would be an announcement. Dorothy Sims, a Sheffield bride who arrived in Pittsburgh in March of 1946, wrote 112 consecutive Sunday letters before she missed a week. She missed it because she had her appendix out. She wrote the 113th from the hospital bed on the hospital's notepad, which was not blue and not thin, and felt like writing on a paper plate. She sent it anyway. Her mother kept all of them in a shoebox organized by month. You write that you are settling in. You write that Harold is keeping busy. You write that you stood in the supermarket on Tuesday in front of the peanut butter and that you did not, this time, cry. Your mother is British. She has been reading between lines for decades. She writes back on the same blue paper. Of course, there are things that don't translate even in the gaps. You try once to explain about Guy Fawkes Night, because November 5th comes and you feel its absence like a missing tooth. You write 2 sentences about it and then stop, because explaining Guy Fawkes Night to someone who already knows about Guy Fawkes Night is pointless, and explaining it to Harold's mother, who has just appeared in the doorway with a question about supper, feels like explaining rainfall to a fish who has never seen rain and does not believe in fish. You fold the letter closed. The Guy Fawkes paragraph stays in the desk drawer. The drawer fills up slowly. 2 weeks later, her reply arrives. Your mother asks if the oranges are still available. They are. You write back to tell her. You are told that a transatlantic telephone call to Surrey costs $12 for the first 3 minutes, which is more than half of your husband's weekly allowance, which is why you are placing exactly 1 such call per year on Christmas Eve from the operator's booth at the Akron post office. You sit in the booth holding the receiver while the operator routes the call through New York, then London, then a small switchboard in Guildford. You hear 3 clicks. You hear your mother's voice, very distantly asking who is there. You say it's you. She says she knows. There is a pause. that costs approximately 4 cents. The connection is not good. Your mother sounds like she's speaking to you from the bottom of a well that has been placed inside a slightly larger well. You can hear her breathing and the sound of the wireless in the background, and the specific creak of the kitchen chair she always sits in. And all of this is more information than you have received in 6 months, and you have approximately 180 seconds to use it. You say you're fine, she says she's fine. You say it's cold here, she says it's cold there too. The operator comes on at 2 minutes 45 to warn you. You have both been watching the clock since the call connected. There is a long, quiet and slightly expensive list of things you do not say in 180 seconds. You don't say that you cried for 40 minutes in the bathroom on Tuesday for no particular reason, and then washed your face and made dinner. You don't say that your mother-in-law called your gravy thin, which is the single most offensive thing anyone has said to you since you arrived, including things that were technically worse. You don't say that you haven't made a friend here. Not a real one. Not the kind who would notice if you stopped coming to things. You say the baby is well. The baby is well. You say Harold got a lead on a job at the tyre plant. She says that's good, love. You say yes. The operator cuts in. You say goodbye very quickly. Your mother is still talking when the line goes. Now you sit in the booth for a moment with the dead receiver in your hand, because the booth is private and your face is doing something you'd rather not carry through the post office lobby. The postmaster, a man named Gerald Kuczynski, does not knock. He has run this booth for 4 Christmas Eves, and he has learned to give it a minute. Gerald is a reasonable man. The $12 came from the household envelope your mother-in-law keeps in the second kitchen drawer. There was a brief conversation about this. Brief is doing some work in that sentence. The letters are not the same as the call, and you discover this slowly over the course of the next year. The letter takes 14 days each way, which means anything you write today won't reach Surrey until January, by which point the thing you needed to say will have either resolved itself or calcified into something you've stopped mentioning. The letter is composed, corrected, folded. The phone call is the thing that is actually happening, right now, in real time, with her voice, and you get 3 minutes of it per year, which is roughly the duration of a pop song, except the pop song doesn't end with you putting on your coat in a phone booth in Ohio and walking home to a house that doesn't smell like anything you grew up with. Other brides write about this. Not in the letters home, not the actual letters, the ones that go in envelopes, but in the notes some of them kept, the private ones, the ones the University of Southern Mississippi eventually archived. One woman from Bristol writes that the phone call home made everything worse, not better, because before the call her mother was an idea, and after the call her mother was a sound, and a sound is much harder to put back in a drawer. She placed 1 call a year, she writes, and spent 3 days afterward not quite being able to eat. You button your coat. You push the booth door open. The lobby smells like floor wax and cold air and someone's wet wool. Gerald Kuczynski nods at you from behind the counter with the careful neutrality of a man who has seen this before and is offering you the dignity of pretending he hasn't. You nod back. You go out into the cold. The sidewalk, you've learned to say sidewalk, is icy and wide and goes on much further than any pavement you grew up on. Somewhere in Surrey, it is already Christmas morning. You experience your first real American summer in July of 1946 in a house that does not, like most houses in this country, contain anything you would recognize as a fan. The temperature on the back porch reads 94 degrees Fahrenheit at 4 in the afternoon, and the air contains so much water that the kitchen wallpaper is starting to come away from the wall in slow, curling sheets. Your mother-in-law calls this kind of weather close. You have other words for it. Back home, summer was a suggestion. A few weeks in July when the light lasted until 10 and someone occasionally left their cardigan at home. The temperature reached 70 degrees and the papers called it a heat wave. People stood in their gardens looking satisfied as if they had personally arranged it. This is not that. This is something the air is doing to you on purpose. Your dress is a problem. It is what you own. which was selected for an English climate and has opinions about Ohio. In July. The cotton dress is fine. The slip underneath the cotton dress is less fine. The stockings, which your mother-in-law has noted twice that a lady wears, are conducting heat directly into your legs like copper wire. You have been indoors since 11. It doesn't help. Your mother-in-law moves through the kitchen with the calm of someone who has done this every summer for 30 years and considers suffering a form of bad manners. She is making a jello mould with suspended fruit inside it, which is a thing you have not previously encountered as food. The jello mould does not share your skepticism. It sets in the Frigidaire with complete confidence, wobbling gently when she opens the door, radiating the self-assurance of a dish that has never once been questioned. You try to boil water for tea. The kettle makes the kitchen hotter. Your mother-in-law does not say anything about this, but her posture says quite a lot. Tea in July, in Ohio, in a house without a fan, is apparently a statement. You didn't mean it as one. You just wanted tea. Mrs. Dorothea Haas, your mother-in-law, who has asked you twice to call her Dot, and whom you cannot yet bring yourself to call Dot, sets a glass of iced tea in front of you instead. It is very cold, very sweet, and contains enough ice that it looks like something assembled rather than brewed. You drink it. It's not tea. It's close enough, and the ice is doing something essential. The scale of the heat is part of it, not just the temperature, the geography. You can see the heat from the back porch, sitting in the air above the flat yard, above the flat street, above everything flat and enormous in every direction. In England, the land folds. There's always a hill, a hedgerow, something that interrupts the view and makes the world feel a manageable size. Here, the sky just keeps going, and the summer presses down from all of it at once. It's like being warm in a very large room with no exits, which is in fact exactly what it is. Your husband is at the hardware store, or possibly the diner, or somewhere that involves other men and no wallpaper peeling off the walls. You think briefly of the 48,000 other British women who crossed in 1946, distributed, statistically speaking, across kitchens like this one right now. You picture one in Minnesota. You picture one in West Virginia. You are all, in your separate kitchens, hot in the same way. And the English language, as spoken in Surrey, did not develop a register for 94 degrees of personal, persistent, and slightly indignant humidity. You go back out to the porch. The thermometer hasn't moved. The wallpaper in the kitchen has. You see your first proper Midwestern snow in December of 1946. Which is to say, you see snow the way the Midwest does snow. Which is to say, you wake up one morning and discover that the maple tree out front has disappeared. The snow is not the polite London snow of your childhood, which arrived once a winter and was gone by Tuesday. This snow is shoulder deep on the front porch. Your father-in-law is already outside with a shovel and a thermos, working very calmly. His name is Earl. Earl has done this before. Earl has done this every winter since 1921, and he shovels with the focused indifference of a man who has long since stopped having feelings about snow and simply manages it, the way you might manage a recurring invoice. He doesn't stamp his feet, he doesn't swear, he just shovels and drinks from his thermos, and the thermos smells like the Maxwell house that Dot started at 5:30. You get dressed and go outside because standing at the window feels cowardish. The cold is not what you expected. Cold in England is wet, and it finds you, it gets inside your collar, under your sleeves, into the small of your back where your coat gaps. This cold is different. This cold is arid, solid, and faintly metallic, with the structural conviction of a freshly opened freezer door. It sits on your face like a flat iron. You breathe in and your nose makes a decision you weren't consulted about. Your eyes water immediately, not from emotion, just from the physics of being outside. Earl notices. He tips his chin toward the house. You shake your head in a way that is meant to say you're fine, and probably says the opposite. He hands you his thermos without a word, watches you drink, takes it back, and resumes shoveling. This is the most he has said to you in 6 months. The street looks like nothing you have a word for. Not Christmas card snow, which is decorative and vertical. This snow is horizontal. It has covered the road, the fence posts, the Henderson's Ford, and what you believe used to be a hydrant. The drift in front of Earl's porch has the structural ambition of a small, low Norman cathedral. The world has been replaced with a different, whiter world that has the same approximate shape as the old one. Back home, a snowfall like this would close every school and train line in the south of England for a week and make the 9 o'clock news. Here, by 7:30, 3 men on your street are already done shoveling, and one of them has started his car. Dot makes oatmeal. It's thick and sweet, and served with a quantity of brown sugar that would have represented your mother's sugar ration for most of February. You eat it standing at the kitchen window, because the table feels too domestic for how disoriented you are. The Frigidaire hums. It always hums. In winter you find the hum stranger than in summer. The refrigerator. Working to stay cold in a house, already surrounded by several feet of cold. You think about writing your mother. The letter will take 2 weeks each way, and by the time she reads about the snow it will be January, and by the time her reply arrives it will be February, and February here, you are beginning to understand, is a different country from February in Surrey. You'll tell her about the maple tree. Shh. You'll try to explain the cold on your face. You'll probably say it's fine. The radio is on, playing something cheerful, and outside the window Earl has moved onto the front walk, making his way toward the road in neat, even rows, unhurried, not looking up. He has never once asked if you're managing. He has never once asked if you're homesick. He just hands you his thermos and resumes. It is, in its way, the kindest thing anyone in this house has done. You take your first driving lesson in your husband's father's 1939 Plymouth on a Saturday morning in March, on a quiet residential street where, as your husband points out helpfully from the passenger seat, there are no other cars, and therefore nothing you can do too much harm to. You sit behind the wheel. You put the car into gear. You begin, with 32 years of British instinct behind you, to drift very gently towards the left-hand curb. Your husband closes his eyes. The problem isn't the steering. The problem isn't the pedals, which are the same pedals in the same order and behave themselves reasonably well. The problem is 32 years of walking out of every shop, every pub, every bombed-out church hall, and turning left without thinking, because left is where the traffic isn't. Your body knows this. Your body is entirely committed to this. Your body has been keeping you alive on British roads since before your husband was old enough to cross the street unsupervised, and your body does not see why America should change that arrangement. The Plymouth has opinions. It is a large car, wide, heavy, and faintly nautical, substantially larger than anything you've driven at home, which was already a category that contained mostly one borrowed Morris 8 and a friend's delivery van on a Thursday. It has the structural ambition of a small ferry. The Plymouth takes corners like it is deciding whether to bother. The steering wheel is wide enough to serve Christmas dinner on. You are not entirely certain the car is aware there are edges. Your husband says, gently, that you want to be more to the right. You say you know. You move the wheel slightly. You drift back left. He opens his mouth and closes it again. This is wise of him. Nobody put this in the welcome packet. There's a whole page about the word sidewalk. There's a section explaining that a Frigidaire runs on electricity and doesn't need ice delivered. There is no page, none, dedicated to the fact that driving on the right-hand side of an American road is a complete physical renegotiation of your relationship with space, direction, and the instinct for self-preservation. The Red Cross considered this either self-evident or someone else's problem. You are, at this moment, parked half on the curb, with the front wheel resting against it like a tired dog. A neighbour named Gerald Kowalski slows his Studebaker to watch from the corner. Gerald doesn't honk. He just watches, with the patient expression of a man who has seen things. Then he drives on. By the third Saturday you can hold your lane on the straight sections, which is real progress, and everyone agrees on this point. The turns are still a collaborative project. Your husband grips the door handle through left turns, specifically. Right turns you handle with something approaching confidence, which makes sense, because right turns away from traffic are the one thing your body and America agree on. The Plymouth, for its part, remains neutral. It goes where you point it, with a kind of democratic indifference. It doesn't judge. It doesn't congratulate. It just carries on being enormous. By May, you drive yourself to the grocery store for the first time alone. It's 6 blocks. You take 15 minutes. You park with mathematical precision, leaving a gap in front that another car could also use, and a gap behind that a second car could use with mild ambition. You walk in. You buy milk, a tin of soup, and a bag of the soft white bread that still tastes to you like sweetened cotton, but which Earl eats without comment. You drive home on the correct side of the road the entire way. You don't mention this in the letter to your mother. It would take 2 weeks to arrive, another 2 for her reply to come back, and by then it would be a month old and you would already be someone else. You write instead about the weather, which in Ohio, in May, is pleasant and enormous, and goes on for longer than weather has any right to go on. You go to the butcher on Tuesday to buy 1.5 pounds of beef for the Sunday roast, because that is what your mother-in-law has asked you to buy, and you stand in front of the glass case for several minutes before you realize that you are waiting for the butcher to ask you for your ration book. You do not have a ration book. There is no ration book. You have a $5 bill and a request for beef, and the butcher is starting to look concerned. For your entire adult life, meat has arrived once a week if you were organized, and the coupon determined the cut before you ever reached the counter. You knew your allowance the way you knew your shoe size, not as a preference, but as a fact. 1 shilling and 2 pence worth. That was the number. The number did not negotiate. The case in front of you has brisket. It has chuck. It has a cut labelled sirloin that is sitting there without apology, without paperwork, without any kind of authorization from anyone. A full loin, behind glass, on a Tuesday, in Ohio. You could buy all of it. The butcher would let you. He's waiting for you to say a number. You say 1.5 pounds. He wraps it in paper, ties the string, and hands it across the counter, and the transaction takes 45 seconds. No coupon stub, no recorded allocation, no weekly ledger. He doesn't write your name down anywhere. You leave carrying more beef than your family saw in a month in 1943, and the feeling isn't quite triumph. It's closer to trespassing. You walk home with the parcel of beef tucked under your arm, and a small, unfamiliar, and faintly guilty feeling tucked under that. You've read about American plenty in the magazines. You've seen the advertisements, but the advertisements didn't mention that plenty, when you first meet it, feels faintly criminal, like someone has made a mistake and you are complicit in not reporting it. The oranges in January felt the same way. The bag of white flour on every shelf. The Frigidaire full of things that haven't been rationed because they never needed to be. Your mother-in-law opens it like it's a cupboard. You open it like it might be evidence. A woman named Patricia, she's the one from the Methodist church 3 blocks over, arrived from Coventry in March, married to a man named Dale who sells insurance. Patricia holds a jar of peanut butter in the church hall kitchen one Wednesday and stares at it the way you'd stare at a letter in a language you almost speak. She opens it. She smells it. She puts the lid back on. She sets it down carefully and doesn't say anything. You understand completely. Britain won't end rationing entirely until 1954. By then you'll have been here 8 years, long enough that the coupon system will feel like something that happened to someone younger, someone you used to be. But right now it's 1946, and the butcher is still watching you, and you realize you haven't moved. You're still standing at the counter holding the wrapped parcel of beef, like it requires a signature. You say thank you. He says have a good day. You go home and cook the roast, and your mother-in-law says it's a little overdone, and you think, the meat here has no idea what it costs. You celebrate your first American Christmas in December of 1946, in a house decorated by your mother-in-law in a tradition she calls country cosy, which involves felt stockings and a great deal of red cellophane, and a wreath on the front door that contains an actual jingle bell. The radio plays American carols you have never heard. There is no King's Speech at 3, there is no goose, there is a turkey, which is, as far as you can tell, a vast unimpressed chicken. Your mother-in-law has been cooking since Thursday. The kitchen smells of brown sugar and something called marshmallow salad, which is, despite what its name implies, a dessert. She moves through the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who has been running Christmas in this house since before you existed, which is accurate, and she hands you a potato peeler with the warmth of someone formally inducting you into something. You peel. You do not ask questions. The potatoes are enormous and pale and come in a bag from a store rather than from a garden, and they take almost no effort, which makes you feel, inexplicably, that you've gotten away with something. The turkey is enormous, pale, and faintly indignant. It has the structural integrity of a small ottoman. It is £19. You know this because your mother-in-law announces it twice, once to the room and once directly to the turkey. Dorothy, that's her name, Dorothy, who wears a holly-sprigged apron and has opinions about gravy consistency, lifts the lid of the roasting pan every 40 minutes to baste it, a process she narrates aloud as though the turkey is a patient who might not otherwise cooperate. The turkey does not cooperate. It takes 4 hours. It fills the house with a smell that is genuinely wonderful, which you resent slightly because you were prepared to be unimpressed. The oven door closes again. The basting pause is over. Back home, Christmas was a coal fire, and BBC Home Service and the smell of damp wool drying on the rack. There was a speech. The King spoke at 3, and the whole country stopped, cups in hand, and listened, and that was the shape of the day. Here, the radio plays something called Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which was released last year and has apparently already achieved the status of a tradition. Nobody stops for anything. The day is loud and continuous and moves forward without pauses. The presents are wrapped in more paper than you've seen used on presents in your entire life. Your mother-in-law gifts you a matching set of kitchen canisters, flour, sugar, tea, coffee, in pastel green with painted geese on the side. They are cheerful. They hold more than any canister you've ever owned. The geese have little bonnets. You thank her sincerely and mean it, and also feel, quietly, that the geese are watching you. After dinner, your husband falls asleep in the armchair with the immediate completeness of a man who has consumed a structurally significant amount of food. His father falls asleep on the other end of the couch. The dog falls asleep on the rug. You and Dorothy do the washing up, and it is the longest stretch of time the two of you have been alone in the house, and she asks if you miss home, and you say you're fine, which is neither answer to that question. She nods and hands you a dish towel with a cardinal on it. The cardinal is also cheerful. You dry the plates. The house is very warm because of the central heating, which doesn't have a dial you can turn down without asking, so you don't ask. You write to your mother on the 27th. The letter will arrive in Surrey in 2 weeks, which means it lands in January, when Christmas is entirely over, and the telling of it feels historical rather than recent. You describe the turkey. You describe the marshmallow salad. You leave out the part about the King's speech, because writing it down would make it more true. The cardinal dish towel is in the second drawer now. You know where everything goes. That is, in its way, what a first Christmas costs you, not the day itself, but the getting used to it. You go to see the family doctor on the recommendation of your mother-in-law in March of 1947, because you have not been sleeping properly and you have been crying in the small bathroom upstairs for reasons you cannot, when asked, fully describe. The doctor is a kind man in a brown jacket who sits behind a desk with a green blotter on it. He listens to your symptoms. He nods. He writes the word nerves on a piece of paper and hands you a small bottle of white pills. The pills are white and slightly chalky and they don't do much, but the visit itself produces a kind of relief, which is the relief of having a word. Nerves. That's the word. Nerves is not a diagnosis. Nerves is a small, neat, mid-century filing system into which the very large, very specific, very unsorted contents of your march go. Red Cross caseworkers in 1946 have been writing it down too. Alongside homesickness and adjustment difficulty, which are the approved phrases for prolonged crying, social withdrawal, and the specific sensation of standing in a well-lit American kitchen in March feeling like a person translated badly from another language. The caseworkers are kind. The doctors are kind. Nobody is unkind. That's not the problem. The bottle sits on the dresser. The label says 1 tablet at bedtime. The bathroom is not really the bathroom. It's the 3 minutes before someone knocks. You've learned to time it. Dorothy doesn't wait long, and the floorboard outside the door has announced you every time you've tried to be quiet. You sit on the edge of the tub, which is white and very clean and smells of something pine adjacent, and you think about the cost of a phone call home, which is $12 for 3 minutes, which is nearly 40% of what your husband drew from the government last week while he looked for work. You do the math. You don't make the call. You write a letter instead, which will arrive in Surrey in approximately 2 weeks, by which point whatever you wrote will feel like news from a person you used to be. The letters home are a small, sustained fiction. You write that things are fine. You write that the house is very modern. You mention the Frigidaire because your mother asks about it every time, as if the Frigidaire is the main character in a story she's been following. You do not write about the crying. You do not write about the pills. You write that the weather has been cold, but that spring is coming and that everyone here is very friendly, which is true, in the way that a waiting room is friendly, warm, well lit, full of people who would rather not be there. Meanwhile, your husband is doing what the papers call readjusting. He's quieter than the man you married in the registry office in 1945, which could mean many things, and you've learned not to ask which one. The man in the brown jacket hadn't asked about him. The form had 1 line for husband's employment status and none for husband's mood in the evening after dinner, when the television is off and the room goes flat. Nerves covered you both, apparently. It was a versatile word. A woman named Margaret from the bride correspondence circle. You've been writing to her since November, when someone at the Red Cross gave you a list of names, writes back to say her doctor used the same word. Different state, different brown jacket, same green blotter, same small bottle. Shed also been crying in a bathroom. Hers had yellow tile. Shed found the word funny when she wrote it, the way you find things funny when the other option is worse. You write back that yours had hexagonal tile, white, and that the pills tasted like compressed chalk, and that you are sleeping slightly better, which is either the pills or the fact that you've stopped trying to stay awake long enough to hear the BBC shortwave broadcast your neighbour misses. Partridge had warned you reception was terrible after 10. The doctor schedules a follow-up in 6 weeks. He's written nerves in your file, next to a date and a blood pressure reading that is slightly elevated. He doesn't ask about Surrey. He doesn't ask about the ratio of your days that feel like days and the ones that feel like something else. He gives you a pamphlet about rest and adequate nutrition, which would be funny if the pamphlet weren't entirely sincere. You fold it in half and put it in your coat pocket. The coat is the one you brought from England. It still smells, faintly, like the ship. You take a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon in April of 1947 from a woman who has the same surname you have. The woman is calling from Brooklyn. She is calling, she says very calmly, because she has been your husband's wife since June of 1939. She has documents. She has a son. She has, she tells you, been wondering for some weeks why her husband has been spending so many evenings at his mother's house in Akron. You listen for 40 seconds without speaking. The call cost someone $12. You're not sure who. It's 3 minutes, which is the increment the operator sells, and neither of you uses all of it. The woman in Brooklyn isn't angry. That's the part that stays with you afterward. She isn't angry at all, just very tired. And she says the words "I'm sorry" in a way that sounds like she's been rehearsing them for the wrong person. Your husband isn't home. He's at his mother's house, which is where he often is, which is now a sentence with new geometry. You sit down on the kitchen floor, not dramatically, just because the chair feels like a decision and the floor doesn't. The linoleum is cold. It is, you will note later in a letter to Margaret, a very clean floor. His mother keeps a very clean floor. The documentation is thorough, dated, and faintly devastating. She has the marriage certificate from 1939. She has a son who is 7. She has a life, already fully assembled, that your husband packed in a kit bag and left in Brooklyn when he shipped out to England in 1943, where he met you at a dance in Ipswich in November and proposed in February, which was a courtship of roughly 3 months, during which he mentioned his mother's house in Akron, but not his wife's house in Brooklyn. The certificate is not a surprise to him. He married you anyway, in a church, with a ring, in June of 1945, and brought you to Ohio like a souvenir. An estimated 1,000 to 2,000 women arrived in America to find this exact configuration waiting for them. The Red Cross documented the cases. The welcome packet at Camp Kilmer had covered refrigerators and the word sidewalk. It had not covered this. You write a letter to your mother that night. It's the 4th letter this month. The letter says you have had some news and are still sorting things out, which is the most compressed sentence you have ever written. Your mother won't read it for 2 weeks. By then you'll have written 3 more, each one slightly more honest than the last, like a confession told in installments. A woman named Edna at the Red Cross office arrives on Thursday. She has a clipboard and a cardigan, and the expression of someone who has sat across this particular kitchen table more times than the kitchen table deserves. She writes down what you tell her, in a careful hand, asks twice if you have somewhere safe to stay, and circles something on the form without showing you what. She leaves a pamphlet. The pamphlet is about legal resources. It was printed in 1944 and refers to your situation as an irregularity in the status of the spousal arrangement, which is the legal system's version of the linoleum, cold, clean, and not especially warm to sit on. Your immigration status is attached to his name. That is the other thing. You've been here 14 months. Naturalization requires 3 years of residence. His name is on the form, and the form has opinions, and the opinions are not yours. You don't say this to Edna, but Edna writes something else on the clipboard anyway, which suggests she already knows. Margaret writes back 2 weeks later. Her letter has a smudge on the corner that might be coffee or might be something else, and she says she's sorry, and also that she knows a woman in Cincinnati who saw a lawyer, and the lawyer was expensive but reasonable, and the word reasonable is doing a lot of work in that sentence, but you hold on to it anyway. You arrive in Stockton, California in November of 1947 to discover that the state in which your American husband lives has on its books a law that prohibits the marriage you are already in. You have been married for 8 months. You have a wedding ring. You have a stamped passport. You have a husband named Frank who served in the Pacific. You also, according to a clerk at the Stockton County Courthouse, have a problem that is going to take a court case to resolve. The clerk's name is Gerald. He is wearing a brown cardigan with a small coffee stain on the left cuff, and he delivers this information with the expression of a man who has handed someone a parking citation. He doesn't say you're unwelcome. He doesn't say the law is unfair. He says the form requires a determination, and the determination requires a filing, and the filing requires a fee of $4.50. You pay the $4.50. Gerald gives you a receipt. The receipt is small. The receipt is for $4.50. The law in question is ancient, broad, and faintly absurd. California's anti-miscegenation statute has been sitting on the books since 1850 and prohibits marriage between white persons and, among others, Filipinos, a category that includes Frank, who is from Manila, who fought at Leyte Gulf, who carries a purple heart in a shoebox under the bed. The law has opinions about this. The shoebox does not. You are not Filipino. Frank is. The marriage happened in the Philippines in February, which meant the War Brides Act got you through the port at San Pedro in April. Nobody stopped you there. It was Gerald who stopped you 4 months later trying to register the marriage certificate with the county because the county clerk's office has a checklist, and the checklist has a line, and the line has Frank's name on it. This is where the year of 1947 gets interesting, in the way that a gas leak in a bakery is interesting. The Perez v. Sharp case is working its way through the California courts right now. Andrea Perez is a Mexican-American woman. Sylvester Davis is a black man. Their lawyer, Daniel Marshall, is arguing before the California Supreme Court that the statute violates the 14th Amendment. The case will be decided in October 1948. You are 11 months early. 11 months is a long time to be in a legal condition Gerald cannot categorize. You aren't invalid. The federal government stamped you through. You aren't illegal. You have the War Brides Act on your side. You are, in the specific vocabulary of Gerald's office, pending. The pending pile is next to the out tray. The out tray is full. Frank finds a lawyer on J Street named Mr. Okafor, who charges $30 a consultation and smokes throughout, and who tells you both that you should wait for Perez, which is the correct advice, which does not make the waiting easier. Mr. Okafor stubs out his cigarette, writes an address on a card, and hands it to Frank without looking at you. The card is for a Filipino community organization 2 blocks over. He says they've seen this before. They have seen this before. The woman who opens the door is named Remedios, and she has been in Stockton since 1941. And she makes you sit down and gives you coffee and doesn't ask any questions you aren't ready for. There are 7 other women at the table. 2 of them are also pending. One of them has been pending since 1945. A form is in a drawer somewhere in Harold's office, and the drawer does not have a timeline. You write to Margaret. You tell her about Gerald and the cardigan and the $4.50 and Mr. Okafor and Remedios and the table of women. Margaret writes back in 12 days. She says the lawyer in Cincinnati turned out to specialize in probate, but she has another lead, and also her mother-in-law has started putting gravy on things that already have sauce, and she wanted you to know that in case it made you feel better. It does, slightly. You meet a woman from Munich at the bus stop in early 1948, who is, like you, a war bride, except her American husband fought against her American country, which is a sentence that does not get easier the more times you say it in your head. She has been told, by her husband's family, not to mention where she is from. She speaks with care. She speaks slowly. When the woman behind her in the queue asks her where her accent is from, she says, after a pause, Switzerland. Her name is Greta. She doesn't offer a surname. She's wearing a good wool coat and hat, and is holding a paper bag of groceries with both hands, the way a person holds something they paid a great deal for. Her husband's name is Earl. Earl is from Modesto. Earl is at work, which is the first good thing she has said about him, and she says it with a precision that tells you it wasn't always the case. The wool coat is good, the grocery bag is heavy. Greta keeps a tight grip on both. The paperwork is thorough, suspicious, and faintly punitive. German brides didn't travel under the War Brides Act. The War Brides Act was not written with Germany in mind. Greta needed a personal waiver, an individual exception filed through army channels, reviewed case by case, assessed against her wartime record, her family's wartime record, her neighbours' wartime records. The form has opinions. The form has a long memory. She arrived in 1947, 2 years after the armistice. After paperwork that she describes as very thorough, which is the diplomatic version of a process that treated her, from first signature to final stamp, as a provisional person. She moved into Earl's family's house in Modesto in late 1946, while the waiver was still processing. She cooked dinner every night in a kitchen that was not hers, for people who had lost a cousin in Italy and didn't mention this at dinner, but also didn't need to. The Frigidaire hummed. The Frigidaire was enormous. She had grown up with a larder and a cold shelf, and the first time she opened the refrigerator, she stood there long enough that Earl's mother came to see what was wrong. She tells you she still isn't supposed to speak German in public. Not forbidden, not a law, just an understanding. Earl's family finds it easier. The neighbours find it easier. The woman behind her in the grocery queue last Tuesday found it very much easier, and also made this known without words, which is a talent Americans have refined to a considerable art form. Now here's the part she says with a small, flat laugh. She got more paperwork than the French brides, more paperwork than the British brides, more scrutiny at the processing centre, and once she arrived, she had fewer resources. The Red Cross welcome stations weren't set up with her in mind. The orientation packets explained sidewalk versus pavement and how a Bendix washing machine worked. They did not explain what to do when your husband's mother asks you what your father did during the war. And the answer is complicated. A man named Carl from her husband's church stops to say hello. He greets Greta warmly, calls her by name, asks about Earl. He's one of the good ones, she tells you after he walks away, like she's been keeping a careful list. She has been here 14 months. The list has 2 columns. You stand with her at the bus stop for another few minutes. She shifts the grocery bag. Inside you can see a tin of something and what looks like a very small, very deliberate bunch of parsley. The parsley has the posture of an item that was selected seriously and will be used seriously and will constitute the emotional centre of tonight's dinner. You understand this completely. Fall, spee, see. You don't say so. She gets on the bus. Switzerland, she said. The bus pulls away into the Modesto afternoon, which is flat and warm and enormous in every direction. You learn American English the slow way, which is by saying things in front of Americans and then watching their faces, and most of the time the lessons are small and low stakes. Pavement is sidewalk, lift is elevator, lorry is truck, but on certain occasions the lesson arrives at a church potluck in front of 14 members of the Methodist Women's Auxiliary, when you cheerfully tell the assembled company that you went to the front door of your husband's office that morning and knocked it up. The silence that follows is a specific kind of silence, not hostile, not confused, just very, very still, the way a room goes still when something has been said that can't be unsaid, and everyone present is quietly waiting to see how you're going to get out of it. You are not going to get out of it. You don't know why the room is still. You smile. The casserole dish in your hands radiates warmth and does nothing to help. The welcome packet at Camp Kilmer mentioned sidewalk. It did not mention this. The packet covered refrigerators, dimes versus pennies, and the fact that Americans wave differently. It did not include a chapter titled Phrases that are perfectly normal in Birmingham and career-ending in New Jersey, which would have been the most useful chapter by some distance. The language is fluent, idiomatic, and faintly treacherous. You speak it well. That's the trap. If you spoke no English at all, people would slow down, enunciate, make allowances. But you speak it well, complete sentences, good grammar, a slightly formal register your mother would approve of, so Americans assume full comprehension and full production, and you assume the same, and then you're at a potluck in front of Margaret Hendricks, who is holding a jello mould and blinking at you like you've said something in a foreign language, which, functionally, you have. The word problems go in both directions. Quite is one of the worst. You say quite good and mean it as faint praise, a restrained satisfaction, a B- of an endorsement. The woman you've said it to beams. She tells her daughter, you loved her potato salad. The potato salad was fine. The potato salad had raisins in it, which was a choice, and you said quite good, and now you are the potato salad's most vocal advocate in the county. You did not sign up for this. You did not sign up for this. The raisins were wrong. A woman named Dorothy Pratt, who runs the church newsletter and has brought a lime gelatin ring, corners you near the punch bowl after the knocking up incident and explains, very gently, with the careful enunciation of someone diffusing something, what that phrase suggests in American English. It is not legally a scandal. It is, however, about as close to one as a Methodist potluck has weathered since 1937. You listen. You nod, you feel your face go the particular shade of red that only complete sincerity can produce. Dorothy squeezes your arm and says you're doing wonderfully. She means it kindly. You would like the floor to have opinions about this and open up. The funniest ones are the ones you don't find out about for months. Someone in your husband's office has been quietly filing your vocabulary under charming British eccentricity since October, and it's only in February, when his colleague's wife mentions it at a dinner party while laughing, that you find out "I'm just going to spend a penny" is not, in American English, a phrase people say at dinner parties. You spent 11 months saying it. At dinner parties, you write your mother a letter about the potluck. You don't include the part about knocking it up, because you don't want to explain the explanation. The letter takes 2 weeks to reach Surrey. By the time she writes back, you've been to 3 more potlucks and have had 2 more incidents, both involving the word rubber, which in America does not mean what it means in your pencil case. Your mother writes that she hopes you're settling in. You write back that it's going very well. You have learned to say doing fine instead of quite well. It's a small victory. You hold it like a coin. You begin, in the spring of 1948, to write letters to other British war brides whose addresses you have collected at the Red Cross orientation, the Christmas service at the local Episcopal church, and the postnatal ward at Akron General Hospital. You write to a woman in Iowa City. You write to a woman in San Diego. You write to a woman in Kalamazoo, Michigan, who turns out to have grown up 2 streets from your aunt in Birmingham. You buy a roll of 2-cent stamps. The letters are not dramatic. Nobody is writing manifestos. They are reports, specific, practical, and occasionally unhinged in their specificity. The woman in Iowa City writes that she has found a shop in Des Moines that sells proper digestive biscuits at 3 times the price, and that she has been buying them anyway, and that she feels no guilt about this. The woman in San Diego writes that the weather is too nice, and that it makes her feel vaguely suspicious, like the sky is lying. You write back about peanut butter, which a neighbour's child handed you in March, and which was sticky and sweet and wrong, in a way that was hard to explain in a letter, but you managed 2 paragraphs. The network, if you can call it that, has no name. It has no meeting room, no chairman, no Tuesday afternoon agenda. It's a roll of stamps and a list of addresses folded into the back of a writing pad. Margaret in Kalamazoo keeps the addresses in a repurposed biscuit tin, a Crawford's shortbread tin, green with a tartan lid, which she has assigned the same level of institutional authority you would give a legal filing cabinet. She updates it in pencil. She crosses out names when a woman moves, then rewrites them with the new address underneath. The tin has handled 4 relocations and 1 divorce. It remains operational. The woman in San Diego finds a 5th address and sends it to you, and you forward it to Kalamazoo, and by autumn of 1948, there are 11 names in the tin. The whole apparatus is, in retrospect, a kind of LinkedIn by airmail, except every message takes 2 weeks each way, every reply is handwritten in a kitchen after the children are asleep, and there is no unsubscribe option, only the slow, unmarked attrition of women who stop writing back. What moves through the chain is intelligence. Practical, unglamorous, genuinely useful intelligence. Where to find Marmite in Cincinnati? Which American doctors are accustomed to the phrase, "I'm not feeling well," actually meaning something, rather than the American version, which apparently means, "I'm fine, don't fuss." How to write a check without causing a scene at the checkout. How to make dripping toast when there's no dripping. You cannot make dripping toast when there's no dripping, as it turns out, but it helps to have been warned. Beatrice in West Virginia writes that her mother-in-law has started using the word quaint about British cooking habits, and that she, Beatrice, has responded by making a toad in the hole on a Wednesday and serving it without comment. The letter does not specify the mother-in-law's reaction. It doesn't need to. The letters also contain the things that don't fit anywhere else in the week. The specific loneliness of a Sunday afternoon when your husband is watching baseball and the children are napping, and the American sky outside the window is enormous and blue and completely indifferent. The feeling of standing in a supermarket in front of 12 varieties of breakfast cereal and needing, specifically, to cry. You don't say these things to your husband. You don't say them at the PTA meeting or the church social or across the fence to your neighbour Dorothy, who is kind but would bring a casserole, and the casserole would not help. You say them in the letter. The letter goes in the post. 2 weeks later, a letter comes back from Iowa City, from San Diego, from Kalamazoo, and it says, yes. Same Sunday, same cereal aisle, same sky. Margaret writes another address in pencil and adds it to the tin. The tin, a small green tartan-lidded thing, holds another quiet, practical, slightly defiant act of correspondence. The roll of 2-cent stamps gets a little smaller. You stand in a line of 43 women in a federal courthouse in Cleveland on the morning of October 12th, 1949, wearing the blue wool dress your mother sent you for the occasion, and the small black hat with the felt rose that your sister-in-law lent you the night before. A clerk in a grey suit calls your name. You walk to the front. You raise your right hand. You promise, in front of a federal judge, to renounce all allegiance to the King of Great Britain. The King of Great Britain, for his part, does not appear to notice. The room smells like floor wax and steam heat. There are 42 other women doing this same thing today, in this same room, and none of you have spoken since the doors opened. A woman 3 places to your left is wearing a hat with a small pheasant feather that keeps catching the light. You've been watching it for 40 minutes. It helps. The oath itself is 4 paragraphs long. It mentions enemies foreign and domestic. It asks you to bear arms on behalf of the United States if required, which strikes you as ambitious given that you've never driven on the right side of a road without gripping the wheel like it personally owes you money. You say the words clearly. The judge, a broad man named Hoffmeister, who looks like he has done this 4,000 times and will do it 4,000 more, watches you with an expression that is neither warm nor cold. Professional. He has a concept of neutrality and has committed to it. A Red Cross volunteer named Dolores stands near the side door with a plate of small cookies wrapped in wax paper. She hands one to each woman as she finishes. The cookies are pale yellow and taste faintly of vanilla and institutional goodwill. You eat yours in 2 bites, standing in the aisle, still holding the paper. Dolores gives you a second one without being asked. She's done this before. She knows. A clerk hands you the certificate. It is single, ceremonial, and faintly cream-coloured, with a gold seal pressed into the corner. It says your name, your country of origin, your date of arrival. It does not say anything about the 3 years that came before it. The in-law kitchen, the supermarket, arithmetic, the letters to your mother that took 2 weeks each way. The certificate is not interested in any of that. The certificate is interested in your name and your date of arrival, and on those 2 points it is firm. You are an American citizen. The paperwork confirms this. You sit down on the nearest wooden bench because your knees have decided, independently, that they need a moment. The women around you begin to collect their coats from the chairs. 2 of them exchange addresses. One is crying, quietly, the way you cry when you don't want to explain it to anyone, the specific economy of it, the small contained sound. You recognize the kind. You've made that sound yourself. In the bathroom, with the tap running, on more than one Sunday. Outside the courthouse, the October air is cold and flat in the way that Cleveland is cold, not the cold of damp stone and coal fire, which you know in your body the way you know your own name, but a wide, dry, sky-level cold that comes from somewhere farther away than weather should reasonably travel. You stand on the sidewalk. The welcome packet told you 3 years ago that Americans say sidewalk. You've said sidewalk for 3 years. It still sounds like a word someone else invented. You fold the certificate and put it in your bag. next to the return bus ticket and the letter from your mother that arrived on Tuesday and that you haven't opened yet, because you knew you'd want something of hers to read on the way home. The bus leaves at 2:30. You have 40 minutes. You sit on a bench near the courthouse steps and open the letter. She asks if you're eating enough. She always asks if you're eating enough. She sends her love to your husband, which is generous of her. She says the dahlia came in late this year. You are 38 years old, sitting in your kitchen in a small ranch house in suburban Cleveland in April of 1962, when your eldest daughter, who is 14, tells you that you sound funny when you say the word water. You are not aware that you sound funny when you say the word water. You say it again, into the kitchen, by yourself. Then you say it the way she said it. The word lands differently in your mouth, and you do not know which version is yours. The tap is dripping. You let it drip. Your daughter doesn't mean anything by it. She is 14. She is already half a person you don't fully recognize, wearing a cardigan you didn't choose, speaking in the flat, broad sky-level vowels of a Cleveland public school. She says water the way her friends say it. She says a lot of things the way her friends say them. You have watched this happening for years, the way you watched the yard in autumn, steadily, without quite believing in it. What you've lost has no name yet, not your accent specifically. Your accent is still there, still audible to anyone who wasn't born inside it. What you've lost is the certainty that the accent is a fact, rather than an affectation. Before this kitchen, before this April, your vowels were just how vowels were. Now your 14-year-old has introduced you to the possibility that you are doing them wrong, in your own house. Over water. You stand at the kitchen sink, the one with the window above it that looks out at 3 identical yards, and you run the tap. The Frigidaire hums behind you. It has been humming behind you for 13 years. You barely hear it anymore, the way you barely hear the central heating tick, or the synthetic pine cleaner smell that greets you at the door. The house absorbed you, or you absorbed the house, and at some point the difference stopped being clear. What you notice now is that you cannot remember the last time you said mum to someone who answered. There is a letter from your mother on the counter. There is always a letter from your mother on the counter, or there was, until 1958, when her handwriting went small and sideways, and then there were fewer letters, and then there weren't. You do not read the old ones. They are in a shoebox in the bedroom cupboard, organized by year, and you know exactly where the shoebox is, and you do not open it. The shoebox has an understanding about what it contains, and so do you. Marjorie Talbot, who was a Birmingham bride and lives 4 streets over in an identical ranch house with an identical Frigidaire, once told you that her son had asked where England was, and she'd said it was very far away, and he'd said, how far? And she'd said, far enough. Marjorie said this without particular emotion, standing in her kitchen, stirring a pot of something American. Her vowels had gone further than yours. You'd noticed and hadn't said anything. Marjorie hadn't said anything either. That's mostly how you process things. By 1962, quietly. In someone else's kitchen. No. Your citizenship certificate is in the same cupboard as the shoebox. A different shelf. You got it in 1949 at the federal courthouse downtown on a Tuesday in October, wearing your good hat. You were 25. You said the oath along with 42 other people in the same room, and a clerk shook your hand, and then you were American, in the eyes of the law, which has never once asked about your vowels. The law is not interested in how you say water. The law considers the matter closed. Your daughter is in the next room now doing homework, or the thing that looks like homework while listening to the radio. She doesn't know she's said anything that's still in the kitchen with you. She's already moved on the way 14 moves on, frictionlessly, toward whatever is next. You are still standing at the sink. The tap is off. The yard is the same as the other yards. You say the word again, quietly, just to yourself. the British version. The one that is funny, apparently. It sounds like your mother's kitchen. Sive if you air, sive a tive. She's EQR. It sounds like stone floors and a gas ring and the particular cold of a morning in February, grey, damp and faintly indignant, in a house that has not yet decided to be warm. It sounds, if you are honest, like home, which is a word you've been careful with for 16 years, because you've never fully sorted out where it points. And so here we are, at the end of a very long crossing. You boarded in Southampton with one suitcase and a husband you'd known for 4 months, maybe 6. You stood in a converted cargo hold while the Atlantic did what the Atlantic does in February. You were processed at Camp Kilmer by a woman who smiled very warmly and handed you a pamphlet explaining the word sidewalk. You met a Frigidaire. You met your mother-in-law. You met rural Ohio. Not necessarily in that order. You stood in a supermarket the size of a football pitch and made change in coins you didn't recognize. You made tea no one drank. You drove on the wrong side of the road once, maybe twice, and didn't tell anyone. You looked out a kitchen window at a flat Midwestern sky that went on longer than anything you'd been trained to expect, and you wrote a letter home, and you waited 2 weeks for one to come back. You learned what peanut butter was. You learned, in March of 1947, what the word nerves meant when a doctor in a brown jacket said it. You learned to keep certain things off the airmail paper. You learned eventually that the word home had stopped meaning one place and started meaning 2. These were practical, stubborn, occasionally furious women who had survived a war and were not about to be defeated by a casserole. They rearranged unfamiliar kitchens. They made friends slowly, then fiercely. They celebrated Guy Fawkes Night for neighbours who stood on lawns looking politely confused. They became American, a little at a time, while remaining something else in the part of themselves that still called the pavement a pavement. And there were others, the ones whose names didn't make it into the oral histories, the women who arrived to find that nothing was as promised, the ones held in place by paperwork and immigration status, and the particular silence of households where something was wrong but no one said so, the women whose difficult years were filed under nerves and left there. But tonight, right now, you have a bed that is entirely yours. You have a phone that costs nothing to use and reaches anyone, anywhere, in less time than it takes to remember that you wanted to call. You have a kitchen that contains no ration book, no copper boiler, no particular moral weight attached to a fresh orange in January. So let your shoulders drop. Let the Atlantic stay where it is. Let the Frigidaire hum to someone else for a while. Sleep tight.